Kirkland would carry our veterans. We always had support for them and wanted it to be special, but boy, they loved those old military vehicles.
We remembered with family members of those who have died in service. East Side Fire pipes and drums came to honor the vets. They marched once with them and then again with Kirkland Fire.
That's the Waconia High School Marching Band. They were from Michigan and chose to come to Kirkland for our parade. The fact is they came to see Seattle, but chose instead to come play in the pavilion that evening after the parade and watch our fireworks. They were phenomenal, and in those uniforms, it was the hottest 4th of July ever.
Followed by our favorite Rainbow City Band and the Saskatoon Lions Band. Doesn't everybody want to come to Kirkland for the 4th of July?
Good old Bikini Beach, so patriotic and a little controversial. There's Bombay haircutters and mermaids, mermaids, and more mermaids. Plaza Garcia has done an amazing job with their brightly colored and talented dancing team. We would love to have them back.
And we always get back the ubiquitous Rotary. The Seafair Pirates have been with us 3 or 4 times, but their cannon upsets so many cats, dogs, children, and others that we have to space them out a lot. Moby Duck, however, is a very impressive float.
Studio East kids always make a great showing, along with everybody else's kids. We see so much talent every year.
Georgia's tries hard to be a winner and gets a little annoyed when they're not. Athena and daughter Lena put it together, and the rest of the family and Pete just ride along, often shooting water guns. We love you, Georges.
Miss Washington joined us one year. She was special, but never so special as Seattle's princesses. They have been with us for years, walking first with the kids in the children's parade and then again in the big parade.
Eastside Tennis Center had a great entry that got split up in this video by a bunch of big trucks, Young Do, Girl Scouts, off-leash dogs, well, they were on the leash, dancers, angelfish swimming, and a bunch of old people in a bus.
Cub Scout Pack 559 always on board, followed by Girl Scouts and unicyclists and many, many more unicyclists. How do they do that?
There's the rest of the tennis center. They chased that ball for a good 10 miles on the route.
Here comes Summerfest 2.0.
There's council in a public works truck. Then they did a fire truck. Councilmember Doreen Marchioni. Bring on the elections. Here's Toby Nixon, Dave Asher, Larry Springer, Jane Haig, Jay Inslee, Jim Hart, Bill Finkbeiner, just to name a few. It's a really fun event on the campaign trail.
Another demi-decade of Kirkland athletics and the cheer squads that support them with energy and enthusiasm.
The Kirkland Classic Car Show was founded in 2003 with our friend Dick Bazell and brought us many years of great shows in downtown Kirkland. We originally started the car show to bring business to the downtown core, and it worked. Those cars, coupled with the Seahawk vehicles, Hawked Out vehicles, and Wheels of Boom, really added to our parade.
And of course, we always finish with Kirkland Fire's ladder truck. That self-same ladder truck that put the star on top of our holiday tree one year. Sometime ask me and I'll tell you that story.
Up next, demi-decade years 2016 to 2020.
Joe Kreka. He was a prisoner of war, as I recall.
And Michael Reagan, riding with John DeVore, and our Gold Star. Mainstay 2995, and the Submarine Veterans, who actually won 2 years ago for Most Patriotic.
There's our totally restored Kirkland police car, a 1946 Ford. There's Fire Captain Joe and the City Council in our totally restored antique fire truck, restored by our firefighters.
Some more mermaids, and they won Best of Show last year. The only reason they probably hadn't won earlier is this float. Falun Da was amazing in 2017 and 2018. We had great weather for the 4th of July almost every single year.
I think it only sprinkled 2 years out of the 19 years.
Here comes Kirkland Safe. In response to the charged political environment of the last few years, at the request of the community, our council adopted the values of safety and inclusion. We even created a resolution in support of that value. These parade pictures depict some of the folks and the organizations that have helped us to stay safe and inclusive. And so it has been 20 years of memories and merrymaking and celebrating the amazing community we are. The intention of Celebrate Kirkland from the very beginning was to get folks in our community with their families and friends to sit down, butt to butt on the sidewalk, and share a common experience that would help to bind us together and make us mindful of all that we have. There are way too many things in our busy existences that drive us apart, so we come together this one day a year and simply celebrate. We celebrate our country's birthday, the service of our military and veterans, the efforts of our athletes and sports teams. We celebrate the businesses, nonprofits, and organizations that call Kirkland home. We celebrate our independence and ability to vote the way we choose to. We celebrate the schools and churches that educate our youth and support our beliefs. This year, we celebrate each other and our community by staying home and staying healthy. Happy 4th of July to all of you.
Veterans Parade alumni photos.
We saw a lot of this on the video, so I'll mention Joe Kreka, Vietnam veteran, who was shot down in 1966 and spent 7 years in Hanoi Hilton next door to John McCain. And also Michael Reagan, a Vietnam veteran and artist who is the recipient of Citizens Before Self-Honor Medal, gifting over 7,000 portraits to families of fallen heroes. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for tuning in to the Celebrate Kirkland 2020 4th of July virtual parade. You can also enjoy the Celebrate Kirkland virtual fireworks on YouTube and Facebook.
"2020 started like so many other years. We were excited to welcome new council members Amy Falcone and Neil Black to our elected body. We successfully navigated a mid-January snowstorm and enjoyed blue skies and bright sunshine as we broke ground on the Juanita Beach Bathhouse project later in the month. Honored to launch our Kirkland Talks on Racism series, meant to engage our community and continue important dialogue about how we can work together to combat institutional racism. But on Saturday, February 29th, everything changed. We had all been cautiously watching news coverage about the novel coronavirus across the globe. Never did we imagine that it would invade our close-knit community so quickly. But invade it did, announcing its presence in a dramatic flurry of aid calls and sirens. Public Health Seattle and King County reported 3 positive cases of what we came to know as COVID-19, including 1 death. 2 of the confirmed cases were associated with Kirkland's Life Care Center, a skilled nursing and long-term care facility located in Juanita. That same day, 50 more care center residents reported symptoms. We were launched into the very definition of a level 1 emergency, a dynamic, rapidly evolving incident. Tragically, more than 60 people have lost their lives in Kirkland, and over the past year, over 500,000 have died throughout the nation. While we recall what happened to our city, our thoughts and prayers are with all the families throughout America who have also suffered terrible grief and loss in this difficult time. On February 29th, we activated our Emergency Operations Center where key staff and city leadership were able to gather together to grapple with how to best protect our community, staff, and first responders against an invisible and deadly threat. We reached out to our regional partners for help, including Public Health Seattle and King County, Redmond Medic One, and Evergreen Health. February 29th has left an unforgettable imprint on the fabric of our city as the day Kirkland found itself, unexpectedly, hurled into the national spotlight as the epicenter of COVID-19 in the United States. The city of Kirkland became a national headline, pushed into the spotlight by a global pandemic. The entire world watched to see how we would respond, and respond we did, heroically.
25 Kirkland firefighters and 2 police officers were placed in quarantine after answering to various calls for medical aid at the Life Care Center. By March 2nd, Fire Station 21 was taken out of service and used as temporary lodging for quarantined first responders. Media swarmed our city, positioning themselves outside Life Care, at City Hall, and even at our quarantine space in Station 21. 2 Kirkland police officers earned national media attention as they discreetly dropped off groceries for our quarantined first responders. Our personnel in quarantine rose to 13 police officers and 31 firefighters at different times. But thanks to the selfless commitment of our first responders, the city remained at full staffing through the frantic first few months. City staff reported in shifts to the EOC. To proceed into the room, you had to pass a monitoring station of thermometers, alcohol wipes, and hand sanitizer. Terms like PPE, virus, pandemic, quarantine, and social distancing became commonplace as we reluctantly incorporated them into our vocabulary. In a way, the EOC provided residents a touchstone, a place to call when they were greeted by the voice of a human being who understood what they were going through. We understood because we were going through it too. The compassion of our residents runs deep. They are our greatest gift. The actions we have taken to protect our community members have all been accomplished with that in mind. These giving, generous people are the lifeblood of the Kirkland community. Overnight, blue ribbons sprang up all over the city, adorning the trees that decorate our roadways and public spaces. Hope-filled yard signs proclaiming, "We got this, Kirkland," could be seen throughout our neighborhoods. Our residents formed a collective fellowship of strength, resilience, and underlying desire to support their city and serve those in need.
In gratitude and awe, we did our utmost to match this passion and desire to serve with thoughtful and deliberate action. Every day, we watched the COVID caseload rise at an alarming rate. We watched as it claimed more lives, hoping and praying for the virus to relinquish its hold. By March 5th, semblances of normalcy began to deteriorate, and we were forced to cancel long-standing community events to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Those first cancellations snowballed into an avalanche of closures and cancellations. Schools closed, city meetings were canceled, gatherings were prohibited by the governor, and the president declared a national emergency. On March 16th, City Hall was officially closed to the public. It has remained closed ever since. The prohibition on gatherings became more restrictive, and just like that, restaurants and bars were shut down entirely. We watched as our community members faced reduced hours and outright job loss. We watched them struggle with loss of income, loss of livelihood, loss of security. We knew that we had to act, and we had to act immediately. On March 17th, we built an online resource library on the city website where residents could find reliable information and links to assistance programs meant to help with housing, utilities, food, healthcare, and unemployment. We crafted a multilingual informational postcard and mailed it to every residential address in the city to reach residents who might not have access to a computer or a smartphone. The postcard gave 3 critical phone numbers, one for information on COVID-19, one for the 24-hour crisis line, and another for access to food. This food access line became known as the Kirkland Food Hotline. We printed multilingual yard signs and positioned them in the city to further our reach and ensure that more people would hear about it. We partnered with the nonprofit Sound Generations to enhance call center capabilities to better manage calls from residents in need of food. And with Kirkland being the caring community that we know and love, we further collaborated with Sound Generations to launch a parallel effort that connected volunteer drivers with homebound individuals and families in need of food. A message crafted by our city manager, Kurt Triplett, was featured as an opinion piece in the Seattle Times in early April. It was a pivotal written message that inspired us to move forward in our mission to defeat this virus, and the powerful theme resonated with all of us. Kurt drew striking parallels between the COVID-19 pandemic and the famed 1970 spaceflight of Apollo 13, which 2 days after launch suffered an explosion that instantly changed its mission of lunar landing to one of bringing its crew home alive. It was an energizing message that allowed us the opportunity to grieve, while also inspiring us to pursue our changed mission with vigor and perseverance. As with Apollo 13, failure was not an option.
As the immediate and lasting impacts of COVID-19 began to take root, the City Council held a special meeting on March 31st to consider several emergency actions to help our residents. In addition to allowing for the temporary deferral and suspension of utility charges, taxes, and waiver of late fees, the City Council took quick action to authorize the Human Services Stabilization Initiative, which made $265,000 in grant funding available to human service agencies in Kirkland to extend their ability to help provide basic needs. We acted to help provide community access to necessities like food and shelter, behavioral health and domestic violence services, and other critical human services. Protecting our most vulnerable residents is always important, but it became even more urgent with the COVID-19 pandemic. In June, we reprioritized our closed community centers and the city-owned Kirkland Teen Union building to help us respond to the emerging needs of our community. We were acutely aware of the impacts this virus was having on every aspect of our lives. We recognized the detrimental impacts of prolonged isolation and also understood that our most vulnerable residents might not feel safe in a public setting. So in July, we launched our Senior Hours program at 5 city parks. City staff were also reassigned to serve as parks ambassadors to provide free masks, encourage physical distancing, promote virtual programs, answer questions, and share information in our public parks. We have continued to ensure service to our most vulnerable residents, successfully pivoting our senior lunch program to a safe, socially distanced drive-through program. This program was recently expanded so that our seniors can get free, healthy lunches 3 days a week. Our Youth Council also rose to the challenge of COVID-19 and forged ahead in the virtual world. In mid-May, the teens spearheaded a virtual summit called Quarantine to provide their peers the opportunity to discuss the challenges of being in quarantine. The event welcomed all local teens and invited them to talk about mental and physical health, school, and relationships in the context of the pandemic. In response to the need to close our parks' play equipment, recreation pools, sports courts, and athletic fields, our Parks Department created virtual programming free of charge during the summer, including online instructional programs, art and science events, and virtual community building social, cultural, and athletic events. In September, we were proud and honored that we had distributed over $1.2 million to human services organizations in Kirkland to increase food support, rental assistance, and provide scholarship funding for families in need. And with our eye on the future, we tackled our biennial budget process, knowing that more support is needed to ensure our community's ability to withstand, survive, and stabilize.
The humanitarian crisis grew to encompass an economic crisis, which required additional nimble strategies and intense energy and intention. A business's ability to survive a shutdown of operations is proportional to its reserves, which are usually limited for small enterprises. Kirkland's ecosystem of small businesses was devastated by the pandemic. In March, storefronts were shuttered, employees were laid off, revenue streams ended abruptly, and Kirkland's small businesses suffered in the early days of the pandemic. City leadership recognized the impact of the state's stay-at-home and cease operations orders. In partnership with public and private collaborators, we adopted an all-hands-on-deck approach to help our businesses survive. Staff worked round the clock, casting wide nets to glean best practices to respond to a situation never before experienced. A first effort compiled and released the Business Resource Packet for COVID-19 in 4 languages. The packet detailed health and hygiene practices for employees and businesses, key local, state, and federal contact information, immediate business strategies for coping with the pandemic, a worksheet for documenting losses with the anticipation of future relief funding, and more. We also moved quickly to address businesses desperately in need of cash. Partnering with the Greater Kirkland Chamber of Commerce and the local branch of Banner Bank, we helped stand up the Kirkland COVID-19 Small Business Relief Fund with an initial $250,000 donation by Google's Community Grants Fund, operating through the Tides Foundation. The fund distributed $1,000 unrestricted grants to 250 businesses who were identified by the greatest need. Businesses used the funds to pay for rent, pay employees, buy supplies, or buy groceries at their discretion. In a second round of the relief funding, the Greater Kirkland Chamber of Commerce Relief Fund raised $211,000 in donations, including $30,000 from the city, approved by the City Council, and distributed grants to a further 175 small businesses in $1,200 increments. Several months later, we launched our own Kirkland Cares Small Business Relief Fund, distributing over $1 million in CARES Act funding in $5,000 grants to 207 businesses and nonprofits in Kirkland.
We also enacted a temporary moratorium on commercial evictions and partnered with the cities of Bellevue, Redmond, Renton, and Issaquah to make available free one-on-one business support for businesses and nonprofits as they navigated the complex landscape of federal, state, and local relief funding programs. A partial lifting of restrictions during the summer, fall, and winter months of 2020 allowed the businesses to resume operations on a limited scale. To help Kirkland restaurants and retailers weather state restrictions on indoor use, we prepared an emergency directive to facilitate safe outdoor use of public and private space. Parking fees and time limits in city-owned downtown parking lots were suspended for significant periods of time. We developed standards and applications for streeteries and parklets in public parking stalls and outdoor uses of private parking stalls. We also waived nearly $16,000 in sidewalk cafe permit fees for 17 outdoor dining arrangements. Finally, over the summer, we closed the west end of Park Lane between Lake Street and Main Street to vehicles at night to create a pedestrian walking mall for socially distanced outings and space for outdoor dining patios. Our community welcomed the opportunity to spend time together in one of the most popular locations in our city. Those summer evenings on Park Lane became a reminder of a world we looked forward to returning to.
2020 was a monumental year of change, of shifting priorities, and of deeply connecting to our humanity and compassion. On May 25, 2020, George Floyd was tragically killed by a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Instantly, our entire nation again found itself facing difficult conversations about structural racism, constitutional rights to speech and assembly, the right to bear arms, and the role of police in our society. For any community, the enormity and complexity of these issues can seem daunting. Kirkland embraced these challenges. In the 3 weeks that followed Mr. Floyd's killing, there were 10 marches in Kirkland and near daily gatherings throughout the city to protest his death and the deaths of other Black and brown people killed by law enforcement. The City Council heard the clear message of these peaceful but passionate protests. It was time for change. Black lives matter. On June 16th, the City Council demonstrated its intention to be part of the solution. We directed the city manager to bring to council a framework for responding to the issues of bias and racism towards our Black and brown community members. Over the next several weeks, the council held a public hearing on the city manager's draft framework, discussed and revised the framework, and listened to people throughout the community. On August 4, the City Council adopted the framework as Resolution 5434. Our 5434 affirmed that Black Lives Matter, that Kirkland seeks to ensure the safety and respect of our BIPOC community members who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and that Kirkland seeks to dismantle structural racism in Kirkland. Our 5434 directed city staff to create new ways for us to report data for incidents of police use of force, activities of our school resource officers, and the city's investments in organizations that help people with food, housing, and mental health. R5434 also laid the foundation for new city personnel that could respond to 911 calls involving issues of mental health, people experiencing homelessness, or other situations where providing services might be a more appropriate response than law enforcement. Finally, R5434 requires evaluation of many other policies, programs, and practices to ensure the safety and respect of Black people. Before implementing any of the actions of R5434, the Council committed to centering these actions on Black people and uplifting their voices. This Black-centered outreach was to be swiftly followed by uplifting the voices of other people of color, including Indigenous people. Since June, city leadership had been meeting weekly with prominent Black leaders in our community who advised us to make nothing for us without us. And so, in November, city staff embarked on a 90-day community engagement process centered on Black people and other people of color. Our goal was to understand how we could build trusted relationships with our Black residents, businesses, and students to best inform our work both now and into the future. We sought guidance on policies, practices, and programs. We listened and learned. One key theme we heard was that it is important for us to understand the trauma, challenges, and struggles that Black people and other people of color have faced and continue to face. Acknowledging the failings of the past is a meaningful start. From here, we turn our attention to taking meaningful action. Building from the earlier conversations with our BIPOC community members, we are rolling up our sleeves to dive into the hard work of dismantling structural racism and ensuring the safety and respect of our BIPOC community members. This work isn't easy, but it is critical in achieving Kirkland's vision of a safe, inclusive, and welcoming community where everyone belongs. There will be many more community conversations in the coming months. We are committed to rising up to meet this critical moment in our nation's history, and we will move forward, as we always do, together.
Even as we met the challenges of the pandemic and call for social justice, the City of Kirkland continued with the business of government, delivering several critical projects for our community. While COVID-19 relief took up a sizable portion of our bandwidth, the day-to-day operations of the city moved steadfastly forward, despite new pandemic-related challenges and obstacles.
Throughout 2020, construction continued on the Juanita Beach bathhouse and playground, and the project was completed just before the end of the year. The roof lines of the bathhouse pavilion are inspired by the roof lines of the overnight cabins that had been on the site in decades past. Juanita Beach now offers 2 distinctive picnic shelters with up to 24 picnic tables, both all-season and seasonal restrooms, outdoor showers, and an enclosed lifeguard life safety space, and new public art. And Juanita Beach now provides our first all-age, all-abilities playground. The inclusive play environment enables all users to develop physically, socially, and emotionally, and includes elements such as a synthetic grass surface that allows for easy movement, swings that can be enjoyed by wheelchair users, and fun and interactive sensory features. We also made progress on the future Totem Lake Park. For too many years, the Totem Lake area has been plagued with a nagging question: is there really a lake? In 2020, we answered with an emphatic yes. After working tirelessly for 5 years to design the park, set aside funding, acquire property rights, and purchase the lake from the King Conservation District, we started construction in 2020. In total, Totem Lake Park will be 20 acres. Of that, 4 acres will encompass Totem Lake itself and its surrounding wetland. The budget for the park is about $9 million, and it is expected to be completed this summer. An especially intriguing feature of the new park will be a 10-foot wide boardwalk that connects the park to the Cross Kirkland corridor. When completed, the new Totem Lake Park will be for Kirkland an ecological centerpiece and a distinctive recreational destination and oasis. In addition to building 2 new parks, we progressed on the redesign of 132nd Square Park, replaced the playground equipment at the Peter Kirk Community Center, and added new play equipment to Windsor and Jostin parks. The Parks Department continued to host creative community events, including fun citywide scavenger hunts and our very first Holiday Lights contest. And we found a way to safely continue the park and green space restoration work parties hosted by the Green Kirkland Partnership.
In August, we joined with New Bethlehem Place, the Sophia Way, and Salt House Church to announce the grand opening of Kirkland Place for Families and Women. The opening of the shelter celebrated efforts dating back to 2012 to provide permanent 24/7 emergency shelters to replace temporary winter shelter for families and women. With this new facility, Eastside families and women struggling with homelessness now have a safe, nurturing place to call home as we work together to find long-term housing. And during their stay, they are provided with constant support, integrated services, and access to community resources, all under one roof. Funding for shelter construction and operations came from many sources, including the City of Kirkland, King County, Washington State Housing Trust, ARCH, partnering East King County cities, and private donors from the community, particularly Holy Family Church in Kirkland, St. Louis Church in Bellevue, and the Sophia Way donors. We know there is much, much more to do to help those most in need, but the Kirkland Place for Families and Women is a shining example of what we can accomplish together.
The redevelopment of the former Totem Lake Shopping Mall into what has become the vibrant, mixed-use village at Totem Lake includes improvements to Totem Lake Boulevard using grant funds from the State Transportation Improvement Board. The improvements help to create an attractive and more usable gateway entrance to all the new activities and attractions at the village at Totem Lake. The project includes 10-foot wide sidewalks that can accommodate bicyclists, decorative lighting, protective fencing along the wetland area, and landscaping. The sidewalk is also being extended along Totem Lake Way, providing an important connection to the new Totem Lake Park. The project will be complete in March. Governments at all levels have been rethinking how we interweave the treasures of the natural environment with the necessities of the built environment. In 2020, Kirkland created a spectacular example of how these two interests can be served. About 40 years ago, in order to enable 100th Avenue Northeast to cross over Cedar Creek, just a little south of Simons Road, the creek was put into a 36-inch concrete culvert. In time, the stream deteriorated, invasive species grew in, and the area became impassable to fish. Last year, we worked to correct those decisions of the past. We replaced the old culvert with a more fish-friendly one. We also placed natural materials on the floor of the culvert, removed invasive species, and reconfigured the course of the stream to slow it and give fish areas to rest. We also planted more than 4,200 native trees and shrubs throughout the project. This portion of Cedar Creek is now a wonderful illustration of how we can help build a sustainable environment. The city continued to make great progress on its commitment to providing safe and accessible multimodal connections in its neighborhoods. Improvements in 2020 included the completion of sidewalks along long-planned, safe routes to school routes, implementing more bicycle facilities during our annual pavement overlay projects, and working with King County on connections to the East Rail Corridor. As part of the Neighborhood Safety Program, we continue to work with community members to find new and creative ways to improve walking and biking safety, such as using colorful paint and candlesticks to slow vehicles and reduce pedestrian crossing distances at the 114th 7th Avenue intersection. Finally, after nearly 2 years of robust community outreach, the Safer Routes to School Action Plan was adopted. The plan identifies the next set of investments in our neighborhoods to make walking, biking, and riding the bus to school safer, more convenient, and fun.
Sustainability is about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Throughout the challenges for 2020, we kept our eyes on the horizon, and by the end of the year, we were able to adopt the city's first comprehensive sustainability master plan. Our plan is bold and lays out a powerful blueprint to action by setting out clear environmental goals and identifying actions to fight climate change, to make our natural spaces healthier, and ensure all people in Kirkland can live in a safe and healthy community. The plan was informed by extensive community outreach and is built on a rich history of environmental leadership. Environmental justice and equity are also integrated as a key theme throughout the plan. We were careful to identify and prioritize actions that will serve people in our community whose voices have traditionally not been heard in government. Already, we've made progress on one of our key goals by expanding our commitment to Puget Sound Energy's renewable energy program, Green Direct. The Green Direct program is a groundbreaking initiative that gives us the ability to purchase 100% of our energy from a dedicated, local, renewable energy resource, while providing us with a stable, cost-efficient solution. This means that all facilities owned by the City of Kirkland, such as buildings, lift stations, park facilities, are now provided by clean, renewable energy and not derived from fossil fuels. The Sustainability Master Plan helps the community articulate where we are now, where we should be, and establishes goals and implementable actions that put the city on a clear path to achieve sustainability for future generations to come.
The safety and well-being of our community is and always has been our top priority. We're grateful for Kirkland voters who, in November 2020, passed Kirkland Proposition 1, the Fire and Emergency Medical Services ballot measure. As a result of Prop 1, we will now be able to hire 20 new firefighters and emergency medical technicians by the year 2023. We will also construct a new Fire Station 27 in Totem Lake, east of I-405, modernize and seismically renovate Fire Station 22 in Houghton, Station 21 in Forbes Creek, Station 26 in North Rose Hill, and fund a temporary fire station to house firefighter EMTs while stations are renovated. Prop 1 also provides for ongoing maintenance and operations. It allows the fire department to acquire pandemic response equipment, including replenishing and stockpiling personal protective equipment such as N95 masks, gloves, gowns, and other resources. In 2018, Kirkland voters passed the Enhanced Police Safety Services and Community Safety ballot measure, which we now call Police Prop 1. This safety measure allowed the Kirkland Police Department to provide additional services for the community. Progress continued throughout 2020, including additional hires in our Community Services Unit and continued investment in human services through funding for mental health, suicide and domestic violence prevention, and shelter operations. The Council also decided in 2020 to provide additional funds for mental health, shelter operations, and human services program coordination. Finally, we set the stage in 2020 for some important additions to our approach to community safety. The Council funded 4 new co-responder positions who will support emergency calls for people experiencing mental illness or homelessness. Also, the municipal court judge and personnel spent 2020 creating a community court in Kirkland, which begins this month. The community court will address low-level, nonviolent offenses like theft, shoplifting, and trespassing by identifying the underlying challenges of court participants that may contribute to further criminal activity and connect them with needed services. These new programs will help demonstrate our simultaneous commitment to community safety and the respect and dignity of everyone.
All along, we have continued to look for ways to support our businesses. One of the central strategies created by city staff to support Kirkland's businesses during and after the pandemic was the creation of the Shop Local Kirkland SLK initiative. Conceived as a digital main street where all local businesses can connect to customers, the shoplocalkirkland.com website helps businesses adapt to a new normal. The Shop Local Kirkland initiative is primarily a recovery strategy, and it takes a longer view than stopgap funding. The Shop Local Kirkland initiative recognizes that business and consumer trends arising from COVID-19 are expected to continue, not just during the pandemic, but permanently. Reimagining the concept of an online-to-business directory, Kirkland's model helps businesses get online and be seen online with a very low barrier. It gives our communities a single portal through which they can shop locally and help their community, friends and neighbors who are Kirkland's business owners. The website is a resource accessible to any Kirkland-based business. Nearly 480 of our businesses are registered on the platform, making for a robust digital marketplace. Consumers are engaged, and we help to drive traffic to the platform with marketing and social media efforts. Within only 3 months of launching, the Shop Local Kirkland platform has welcomed 50,000 site visits and has sent more than 2,000 leads to local businesses.
Our community partners are central to meeting the most basic needs of our community members. Thank you to each of you who has volunteered or donated to help our neighbors. To our human services providers for the very important work that you do in serving our neighbors in need. And to our BIPOC community members and advocates for your emotional and intellectual labor in partnering with us to shape the future of human services in our city. Kirkland is a better place because of each of you. Thank you.
Thank you to our first responders for risking their lives to keep us safe, and to all the other essential workers who have made sure our needs are met.
Thank you to all our partner organizations who have helped throughout this crisis. Local government is simply not able to tackle all the issues on our own, and we depend on our partnerships with other agencies, the Chamber, Downtown Association, School District, neighborhood groups, and many other organizations to not only help identify solutions, but to work together with a common purpose of building up our community and supporting our vulnerable populations, small businesses, and those in need. I'm grateful for all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you to Kirkland businesses for making Kirkland such an extraordinary place to live and work. And thank you for all that you've done throughout this challenging year to adapt your business, support your neighbors, help your fellow business owners, and contribute to your community.
Thank you to the community members who have generously and candidly shared their thoughts and experiences as the city tackles issues of inclusivity, equity, and social justice.
Thank you to the City of Kirkland staff for their hard work and perseverance despite the challenges of 2020. Your dedication amidst great uncertainty in the early days of the pandemic kept the city operating in a safe manner and chartered the path for cities that followed. You responded quickly and creatively to help our community, small businesses, and people in need. At the same time, you recognized the historic moment and the need to focus on racial justice, and it started the work ahead towards a more equitable future.
Thank you to the entire community of Kirkland for your ongoing, unrelenting compassion and resilience. This has been very, very hard, and you have continued to amaze and inspire us with your tenacity and willingness to make it better. We are so very proud to serve you.
I would like to call this to order this City Council meeting of April the 20th, 2021. Clerk, will you please call the roll for tonight's meeting?
Councilmember Nixon?
Here.
Councilmember Black?
Here.
Councilmember Curtis?
Here.
Councilmember Falcone?
Here.
Councilmember Pascal?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Arnold?
Here.
Mayor Sweet?
Here. Thank you. Our study session tonight is for a Vision Zero action plan and active transportation update. We expect to reconvene our regular meeting at approximately 7:30. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So Tonight we have two separate but very related topics. And what we're looking for from the council tonight is comments and suggestions and anything you want us to incorporate as we move forward with both of these two projects. So here to walk you through them is Joel Funt, our transportation manager, and Kimberly Scrivener, our transportation planner.
Welcome.
Great. Thank you, City Manager, Mayor Sweet, members of the council. Let me share my screen. Great. So the first topic tonight is about Vision Zero, which is the goal for zero traffic fatalities and serious injuries on our street. What I'm going to do tonight is first to give a little bit of a background, talk about what we're seeing from our crash data, mention some strategies that we're looking at for the action plan, and then talk about some next steps. Feel free to stop me at any time during the presentation. So the Vision Zero concept was created in Sweden in the 90s, and based on their success, has been adopted by cities throughout the world. I'm not going to read the key tenets of Vision Zero to you, but I wanted to show them. This is really the concept that Sweden identified has been adopted by lots of folks. A couple things I will mention on the slide, though. One is about language. So you'll see me use terms like crash and collision. The Vision Zero concept tries to stay away from the term accident, and that's because of the first two bullets, that traffic deaths are thought of as being preventable and that street design should anticipate error. So that's some of the reasoning behind the language that you'll hear or won't hear. The other thing I'll mention with this is to talk about the most vulnerable users of the system and what that means. In 2019, the Washington State Legislature passed the Vulnerable Road User Law and defines vulnerable users as pedestrians, and then anybody riding a bike, a electric mobility device, a moped, a motorcycle. It even includes people riding a horse or a tractor. But essentially, anytime you're not encased inside a vehicle that would otherwise protect you. The other time I've heard the vulnerable users being used in another way is when relates to vulnerable populations. So people with low income, seniors, folks that may not have a choice of whether to drive or not. And so that's some context about when we talk about the most vulnerable users of the system. Kirkland is already a Vision Zero city. Our goal for zero traffic fatalities and serious injuries by 2035 was adopted in the 2015 Transportation Master Plan. And what I'll mention here is that there essentially there is an emphasis on fatalities and serious injuries. And serious injuries, I got a lot of questions about what that means, is defined by an injury that is life-threatening, that or would result in permanent impairment to your body structure or your organ, or that would require significant medical intervention to prevent permanent damage to your organ system or your body structure. So just wanted to mention that. The other piece I'll note here is the systems approach, where we're looking at our whole system and how everything works together. We'll talk about the other couple things as we move along. So Kirkland, safety has always been how Kirkland does things. We, every CIP project, every program, we are always looking at ways to make our system safer. A couple other things that have happened since 2015 of the adoption of this policy is to create a Vision Zero service team. So that is our interdepartmental team, because in order for us to achieve the Vision Zero goal, it will take a village. We also purchased a Crossroads analytics software. So this is essentially helps us better track the crash data, which is a huge improvement for us. The previous to that, we had a 20-year-old software that required manual entry. So this has saved us a lot of time and energy and is able to help us better track and analyze this data. See the map on the side is a web map that is of our crash information. This shows all the fatal and serious crashes by all modes, and then in addition to that, any bicycle and pedestrian related mode. One thing I didn't mention earlier, I meant to, was that while the goal for zero may seem aspirational, Kirkland does have a history. In between 2001 and 2008, we had a very long stretch without seeing any fatalities. Then again, in 2010 and 2013, their serious injuries has remained somewhat steady. Another example is Oslo is probably one of the most documented success stories of Vision Zero. They went from 41 deaths in the 70s to 18 in the 90s, and in 2019, they had 1 death. So reducing those numbers down does take time, but we have seen that happen in other places. The last thing I'll mention on this slide is that the police department has been participating in the Target Zero task force with the county for 3 years now, I believe. Target Zero is the name of the state's plan with the same goal of zero fatalities and serious injuries. So Kirkland has always been, as I mentioned, safety is just how Kirkland does things. And Kirkland has always been a leader. We were the first city to adopt a complete streets policy, one of the first cities to adopt and bring on our pedestrian flag program. And what I'll mention here is that what we're talking about today with Vision Zero and active transportation, we're talking about implementing the first 3 goals in our transportation master plan. And it's been working. This slide shows how we compare to both our neighbors and some other cities in Washington state with a similar population. But yet there's still more to be done. We still are seeing fatalities and serious injuries here at Kirkland. So my next section of this presentation is to dive in a little further into the data analysis. Before I do that, I just wanted to pause and see if anyone has any comments or questions before I continue on.
Council? Looks like you can proceed, Kim.
Great, thank you. So in Kirkland, 62% of our fatal and serious injuries are bicycle and pedestrian related. I'm going to break this down a little bit more by the fatalities and serious injuries. So in the last 5 years, 2015 and 2019, we've seen 8 total fatalities and 55 serious injuries. One thing I will point out, if you're a number cruncher, this slide shows the information by crash type. And so parked vehicle is a type of crash, pedestrian and bicycle involved is a type of crash. And that information is, that kind of categorization is set at the state, set by the state. The previous slide I showed you is by mode. So when we pull out bikes from pedestrians, or motorcycles from motor vehicles, we're really talking about the number of people that were injured. Whereas if we talk about crash type, it's the total number of crashes. So that's why you might see a little bit of a different percentage. I just wanted to clarify that. So this slide I feel is very important to show, and the next couple of slides I'll get into this, is about the vulnerable users of the system in the rate of injury. So 76% of the time when a motor vehicle is involved in a crash, it results in no injury, where only 11% of the time, if a vulnerable user of a system is involved in a crash, results in no injury. And so these other types of injuries, and luckily we're not seeing a lot of fatal injuries, but as you can see, you'll still see the severity here. And a lot of that has to do with speeds. So the lower the speeds, it will increase the likelihood of a person surviving a crash. Now, this slide I like to talk about. This information is not represented in any of the data that I've shown you already. The data I've shown you already is just total numbers. But what we don't often talk about is that people that are out walking and biking only take up 12% of the trips on our streets, but still take up 16% of all serious and fatal injuries if you compare to the total number of crashes. Whereas it's the opposite for motor vehicles, 81% of the time, or people driving take up 81% of the total trips on a road, and then only 2% of the time somebody is injured. So it's another way of looking at the data. Similar pattern. The chart on the left is in the Puget Sound region. On the right, it's the state of Washington. And the reason why I'm kind of driving this topic home a little bit is that the suggestion for our Vision Zero action plan is to also include bicycle and pedestrian injuries. So as I mentioned earlier, Vision Zero in general really focuses on serious injuries and fatalities. And this is really a policy question. I'd like to hear your feedback, is that the suggestion, because of the higher number of people walking and biking getting injured in Kirkland, that we would like to also have a more detailed analysis of bicycle and pedestrian related crashes. And we can limit those to injury crashes or all crashes for bike ped. The city of Portland did set some precedent for that, and that's how they have their Vision Zero plan outlined. The other thing that I'll mention is that when we look at the contributing factors and the risk and how to address them, we look at both the characteristic of the roadway and the human element. So in Kirkland, we're seeing a higher percentage, almost 50% of the human element being failure to grant right-of-way to either a person walking or biking or driving. And then following up with that is inattention. DUIs are still kind of on that high list, but they have gone down since we have done this analysis from 2014 to 2018. In terms of the roadway characteristics, we look at speed. The highest percentage in Kirkland are places where we have no traffic control devices. Also roads that have a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, that's about 60%. And then other intersection related roadway characteristics. So those are some of the ways that we can look at what the contributing factors are and how we might address them, both in general and then specifically to our roadways. Are there any questions about what we're seeing from the data before I move on to how we plan to address them?
Seeing none.
All right, I'm gonna keep moving on here. So the first thing is we look at our high crash corridors and areas. And this is done in a couple ways. First, I just want to point out that this is not an exhaustive list of all of our priority corridors. I just wanted to show you the top one so that you can see the total numbers. I do want to highlight, though, that we have a lot of projects on our books to address these places already. Totem Lake has a whole host of projects, including the Totem Lake Gateway project, which will add a significantly wider sidewalk to access the Cross Kirkland corridor, the Totem Lake Connector. We just received a grant, from the state of Washington for local road safety to improve crossings on 124th Street. That same grant was successful with some improvements on Central Way and in downtown. We have the Winnie to Drive quick wins. We have the Lakeshore projects on the waterfront. There are a couple major CIP projects that we're looking at adding Kirkland's first protected bike facilities. And so that will be one thing we will make sure to add in this action plan is or both what's on the books, adding information about projects that we already have and improvements that we are doing now. And that'll help us narrow down the places we need to focus on. The other thing that I'll mention, and as I said, this is really a policy decision, is to include other bike and pedestrian injuries. As I mentioned before, we can look at injuries, bike and ped injuries to add to our analysis, or we can look at all other bike crashes. I used injuries because that's what Portland did, and that just set some precedent for it. What we did here is broke down the corridors. Since we're looking at more numbers, it allowed us to break our corridors down into smaller chunks. There are different roadway characteristics on different sections of the roadway. So this helps us narrow down and we can zoom in and find little clusters here and there by looking at it this way. It's just another way of doing things. My suggestion for the Vision Zero action plan we would do both. We can have the highest corridors for fatalities and serious injuries. This is how the state likes us to do that for their local road safety plan. Like as I mentioned, we had a couple successful projects that were funded by that program, and they will look at the serious injuries. And then we can break things down a little bit more detail. Any questions on these before I move on?
Council? Keep going, Kim. I'm sure we're saving them up.
All right. I know that equity is very important to the council. And so as I mentioned, we do want to include the most vulnerable users of our transportation system. And then in terms of our analysis and setting priorities, we can look at these things both geographically and then also what the data tells us in terms of sheer numbers. So high proportion of people of color, people with low income, limited English. That first bullet that I just walked through, that data is not included in the crash data, but we can look at age. Schools and seniors. We currently right now, we are not seeing a high rate of seniors or kids getting hit. We do have some that fall into our serious injuries and fatalities, but it's not a high number, and this is something that we'll continue to monitor. Just want to make sure to address how we plan to take a look at equity as we're putting this plan together. So the next couple slides, there are 4 of these, and you have more information about these in your staff report. These are a list of draft objectives and strategies. So improving our crash data is one way. One challenge with working with crash data is that the only data we have now comes through police reports. There are a lot of other crashes that happen on the road, and particularly those are bicycle and pedestrian related that we don't see. There are a couple ways that we can derive additional information. That's partnering with public health agencies, working with a fire department for calls that they get that don't necessarily result in a police report. Bellevue uses the app Waze. So there are a couple of ways that we can see how we can better improve our data and therefore the analysis. We'd also like to improve our information on our website, the information to the public, such as web maps, trends, and this would be something that we would update over time. either annually or every other year. Innovations in technology. So for instance, this could be partnering with the City of Bellevue with their video analytics project. This is where they take their traffic cameras and they try to predict where you're seeing exposure and risk for crashes. So that's one example of improvements in technology. Data before and after a project. This one takes a little bit more time because you want to see how well your project is doing, and that can take a couple years. One example is that we did take before data for our new neighborhood greenways that are coming online. So we'll see if that's improving our crash rates on those corridors in the future. And then the traffic monitoring program, this would be additional counts or ways to count, such as bicycle and pedestrian counters. This could also be taking a look at places where we see people more exposed. And feel free to stop me on any of these. In terms of a culture of safety, so we would like to educate the public, and this is a little less about going out to the public and asking them about crafting these objectives. So we said Kirkland is safety is just how we do things here. This is more of taking the opportunity to send messages out to the public to remind them of the importance of safety. This could be information on our website. We could send out existing public service announcements that are created by others, such as the state or King County. For instance, the vulnerable users law that I mentioned, one of the pieces to that is to make sure that you don't follow someone too closely and you give cyclists 3 feet of space when you're passing. That is something that is appropriate for us to share. We can also create our own public service announcements. This could be related to weather or seasonal, that type of thing. I think when it starts getting dark or sunny and everything gets busy. Maintain the culture of safety interdepartmentally. So that's where our service team comes in, and we are constantly reminding each other how important this is. It did mention in the staff report about working with through active construction zones. I want to clarify that our planners and our development team, they work really hard to make sure that that there's safety through construction zones. And we're not seeing a pattern right now, but sometimes compliance can be challenging. And so just want to say, folks are already really doing a good job. We can improve on that. The traffic safety education in schools, we have a great partnership with the Safe Routes to School Action Plan and with the schools. I'll mention just anecdotally that hopefully we can get back to it because that'll be fun. You probably heard with the Safe Routes to School presentation that the school district and in partnership with us was successful in receiving a grant for a bike trailer, and that includes bikes and a way to haul them around, and Kirkland can borrow that from the school district for our own events. We've also had conversations with the police department about involving the school resource officers to get involved. So we think education will be important and in a fun way to make our city safer and engage kids. And then of course, staff training. And I already mentioned that coordination with Bellevue is an example of really learning from each other and making sure that we're up to speed on the most up-to-date and recent improvements on how people are addressing Vision Zero. And then prioritizing safe street design. So potential engineering improvements, and not just engineering improvements, but also seeking innovation in design. We really think we have a lot of opportunity in a lot of places, but in particular at intersections where we are seeing a higher crash rate and more conflicts. And that's also where we have little bit more space to work with. And some of those could be projects where we take the bike lane all the way to the intersection. That could be more money for a CIP project, and that's really a policy decision. And there are a lot of other really fun, innovative ways to look at how to keep people separate, particular intersections, but also in general, the separate bicycle and pedestrian modes. I mentioned already, we are working on a couple projects that include Kirkland's first separated protected bike facilities. I shouldn't say first, we have one in Winita with that. But continuing to look at that. And then essentially making sure that we're continuing to find opportunities for capital investments. For multimodal facilities, channelization is also an opportunity. And then operations. So there's a lot of things we could do with signal timing that can improve pedestrian safety. An example of a project is the pedestrian scramble downtown. We can talk about leading pedestrian intervals where you allow the pedestrian to get a head start so they're better visible when somebody makes a turn, even some bike symbols. The prevention of blocking of crosswalks, that's where enforcement comes in, and bike facilities, our school camera program, speed limits. The response team after a crash is something that we also think was a good opportunity to get together and talk about how it happened. Is there an engineering solution? Is this something that's more enforcement? And just really taking a look and having a conversation when we do see an incident here in Kirkland. So this is just kind of a summary in terms of better coordination, monitoring, and then being transparent both to the public and to council. And so with that, before we talk about next steps, I just want to give the opportunity for anyone to provide additional feedback, particularly about the strategies I went through, and I can back up if you'd like.
Is that Councilmember Pascal?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess this is the time to kind of provide any input on the Vision Zero before we turn it to active transportation plan. Is that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, just some thoughts that I had, and I think you've addressed you touched on some of them. I think many of you know that I sit on the Active Transportation Safety Council for the state, and Vision Zero is a prominent subject at our meetings. We talk about it quite frequently, particularly from how we can help encourage other communities across the state from adopting it. There's only a few, I would say, when you look at all the different communities, and there's some things in there that we've been talking about. One of them is safe vehicle speeds. And so I recognize that the plan kind of tees up issues that we will address going forward at some time, right? We're not going to accomplish everything all at once, but it is a plan that identifies things that we might try to tackle or discuss. And some of the things that I've been thinking about are wanting to do a more comprehensive review of our speed limits on arterials throughout the city. I feel like there's some consistency issues when I look at arterials that look the same, feel the same, but have different speed limits. And that's just how things have gone, because we haven't really done that. We've annexed different areas of the city. We haven't necessarily changed speed limits. So it'd be good to do a comprehensive review, something that Shoreline just recently did that I was looking at. Speed limits were set based upon 85th percentile speeds. State RCW has been changed to allow for speed limits to kind of take that Vision Zero approach, considering other factors such as surrounding land uses and the traffic crashes and injuries and fatalities and other things that are now considered that weren't when speed limits were originally set. So that's one thing that I'm not saying that we have to tackle right now, but I would like to tee that up to do that sometime down the road. Another one is a consideration of 20-mile-per-hour speed limits along our residential streets in our neighborhoods. That's a state law that was changed several years ago. I think it would be something to have a conversation about and see if there's interest and desire to do that. I know it's certainly a controversial subject perhaps, but many cities are starting to do that, and reinforces safe speeds in neighborhoods. Another, I'm talking about vehicle speeds. None of these are easy things, mind you. The third one is for school zone speed limits, which are 20 miles per hour. I've been in many communities that actually have those speed limits set all day long from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. rather than, having a light that blinks when school's starting and letting out. It's made to reduce confusion and to reinforce the fact that you should always drive slower around schools. Communities such as City of Lakewood have it. Even Sandpoint, Idaho, that I was visiting this winter has school zone speed limits all day. So that'd be something that be good to say something about that if that's something that we could think about. And then you talked about safe street design, and it's really about promoting slower speeds, providing opportunities to walk, bike, and roll. And I'd like us to kind of think about, we used to have this neighborhood traffic control program that basically implemented many of our kind of horizontal deflection type of design measures in our neighborhoods, whether those are chicanes or kind of bulb outs or traffic circles, things like that. We don't do that much. And most of that infrastructure was built 20 years ago. I think it would be good to reevaluate that, and maybe not to the level of what we've done in the past, but to do those low cost, high value type of improvements. So instead of a traffic circle, you put up a candlesticks and you paint the traffic circle. And so you can do that at a much lower cost, but you still get the same benefits, which is slower speeds, reduced collisions, confusion of the four-way kind of local street intersections. And then at the same time, you can look for opportunities to put in a pedestrian bicycle infrastructure. So those are things that I think it would be good to highlight as things to try to accomplish and or outcomes out of this plan. Because I am a realist. I know that you can't do it all at once, but if it's not in a plan, it's not an adopted plan, we'll never do it. So I'd like to just see those things discussed more in the Vision Zero, and maybe some of them are. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Kimberly. Very thorough presentation. And I think the reason why you didn't get a lot of questions and comments is that you're doing a great job of presenting a lot of information through that will be great to share. A couple of comments. First, on data, I definitely support the Transportation Commission's feedback that the action plan should include strategies from data from other sources than police reports. And I appreciate your suggestions on how we might get that from public health data or fire EMS response, but it's definitely important to get a full picture of injuries. And I also support your look at saying, let's track the data around crashes that the state needs, but let's also track the injury information and use that for prioritization, because there are a couple of corridors there that had some clear impacts that weren't rising to the serious injury level that may inform our investments. So I think that would be helpful. Councilmember Pascal mentioned some things that we can do with paint and bollards. And when I think about safe street design and investments, that sounds expensive and long-term. And I definitely support saying, what are the things that we can do now? I think of these more as interim steps than in replacement of, as you suggested, John, the traffic circle or other things, but it's certainly something we could do immediately and then continue to have the other projects on our CIP list, and we would get to them eventually. But I think there's definitely some quick wins for safety, for dedicated bike lanes and things like that that we might be able to do very cheaply through paint dollars and rechannelization, that I would like to look at those opportunities as interim steps. Finally, I really appreciate the idea of the response team. I know that when we've had these incidents in Kirkland, that within the council, there's been a lot of questions that we've gotten answers to internally, where we've asked the sort of things that needed to happen for safety improvements, actions we can take in the future around all those previous fatal crashes. It's great to formalize that and put it into something that could be published for the public to be able to say, here's what happened in this case, here are the things we need to do, and when those things might happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I agree with Deputy Mayor Arnold's comments. Great job, Kim. Great presentation. There was a lot of really informative data and background, so you really helped present this really well and had some great ideas. I'm going to piggyback on some of the comments of Councilor Pascal around school zone safety. You know, as a mom to 3 young kids, this is something that's on my mind a lot. In fact, I believe next fall I'm going to have a child in each of the 3 schools along 84th Avenue up here in Finn Hills. So this is something that is very much on my mind a lot. I first have a question that you may not have the answer to handily right with you, but I'm curious to know, you had that slide that showed the fatality rates by speed. I think it was like 20 miles per hour, and then I forget what the other 2 faster speeds were. Thank you for working to bring that up. Yes, there it is. So even at 20 miles per hour, which is our current, I understand this is a statewide law for school zone speeds, is the 20 miles per hour. 10% is still, to me, a pretty high fatality rate for that speed. So I'm curious to know, do we have data, or are there data available on even lower school zone speeds of, say, 15 miles per hour? I have to say, other places that I've lived, I'm used to seeing 15 miles per hour in school zones. So I was a little bit shocked to see 20 miles per hour when we moved here several years ago. And I'm wondering if that's something that the data do show, that there's an even, that's even safer, or, you know, if it's safer enough that it's worth advocating for at the state level to change that and have a reduction down to 15 miles per hour. So I'd be curious to see if there are data on that and what they are. Also curious to know, I remember having conversations, this is probably just shortly before the pandemic, about what we can do in the short term to make school zones safer. And there was a discussion about how there's some inconsistencies in the signage, particularly in the annexed area up here in North Kirkland, that we don't have the same school zone signage as other neighborhoods in the city. In particular, I don't remember all the different types of signage, but I do remember discussing like an end school zone signage that I know we don't have up here in around the Finn Hills schools. It's hard for some drivers to know when that school zone ends. So I was curious if we could get an update at some point on what the progress of that was, of getting just consistent signage throughout the city in our school zones, because I think that's something that's of particular importance as our kids start to head back to school. And then I really, really appreciated your slide on the public training, both for the general public and also some of the educational opportunities in schools. I think that's great. I think there's definitely a need in the community for adults to learn more about this as well, and not just with like pushing out information, but with kind of more interactive and engaging training opportunities. This is something I hear from the community a lot, that we hear complaints of, you know, drivers of vehicles saying, oh, the bicyclists never stop at the stop center, they never do this, and bicyclists saying, well, drivers don't pay attention for us and they don't look before they turn right, or whatever those things are. I think there's been some changes, right, over the past couple of years in Washington state law related to bicyclists and drivers and road sharing. So I think it'd be a really valuable tool for the community to have those educational opportunities, because I think it's confusing and it's really nuanced, I think, some of it. And so I think having a good training opportunity for folks in the community
would also help add to the safety. So great work, and thanks so much, Kim.
Any further discussion? I'm going to just add a teeny bit. Councilmember Pascal's paint and candlesticks grabbed my brain. I just think it might be an opportunity to try some things like that. I wonder if you ever put anything up like that, if you were to put something temporary up and then put a camera on it, would there be any data that you could gain in terms of changing behaviors and how long it takes to change behaviors? I don't know. And maybe somebody's already done that. The other thing that I grabbed was, Kim, when you talked about the bicycle trailer and the bicycles that are available, I immediately thought about some kind of a festival that potentially we could do this summer, incorporating bicycle patrol or school resource officers, but maybe some kind of an actual training for kids around bicycle safety and the things to pay attention to, and with the various signs like you had in the picture. Anyway, I thought that was pretty exciting. So you want to proceed with your last slide?
Thank you. And this is just to sum up our next steps. So based on your feedback today, I wanted to leave some room to complete any additional analysis that's been requested by council, and to make sure that the action plan includes what you addressed today. By the summer, we'd like to have a draft action plan for your review to then have sometime in August or September for council approval.
Excellent. Great presentation, Kim.
Thank you. All right.
So, are you going to just drive us right into active transportation?
I can.
Okay.
And I will. All right. Next step. So what I'll mention here to start off with is that our overarching goal is to get more people out by walking and biking. And that is by making it feel safe, comfortable, and convenient. And one of the things that we're thinking a lot about is, and we hear from the community all the time, is that if just a part of the trip is safe, but then there might be a segment in your trip that is harrowing or scary, somebody may choose not to walk or bike for that particular trip, or they may choose that they don't want to bring their kid or their family member with them on a trip that may include even just a short segment that doesn't feel safe. The other thing about encouraging more people out walking and biking is we have a healthier community. So the work getting more people out walking and biking, the CDC has a call for, it's called a call for walkability. And that recognizes that people don't often have time to go to the gym or make themselves healthy in other ways that are more traditional. But we'll actually could argue that walking and biking is probably the most traditional way of getting more exercise, and it's also more accessible to people. So just want to mention that we'd really like to focus on getting more people out, making it safe and comfortable and convenient and connected. So I do have about 16 slides of substance, not including my transition slides, to give you an idea how long this is. Let's start with the background, talk about the coordination and outreach that we've done so far, get some feedback from a policy direction from you. This presentation does not include a set of draft objectives and strategies because we really want to make sure we're getting direction from you before we craft those. And then we'll talk a little bit about timing. So we have, the last time we updated our active transportation plan was in 2009. And then subsequent to that, the goals were incorporated into our 2015 transportation master plan. From 2009, We included, for instance, developing of the Cross-Kirkland corridor, adding more facilities for pedestrians, increasing the number of children who use active transportation to and from school. I won't read them all, but when the 2015 transportation master plan was adopted, it took those goals and made them more simple and a little bit longer, but it's essentially safe networks, removing barriers, make walking and biking more intuitive. That includes wayfinding. We have, and then interconnect facilities that are safer and addressing people of all ages and abilities. So when we talk about walking and improving the walking environment for people, we're talking about lighting and safe crossings of the street and getting to the bus stop. And I mentioned wayfinding, finding creative ways to, that we just discussed, to have low cost improvements, and also finding ways to make sure we're accommodating people of all abilities as well as ages. So even looking at innovations and pavement markings so that people that cannot see and can navigate around. Kirkland has made quite a lot of progress. For instance, I just mentioned the Cross-Kirkland corridor and the connections that are going to be underway pretty soon. You're going to be able to bike all the way to the Burke-Gilman and the Sammamish River Trail, which will be so exciting. We've made huge progress with, I think we have about 60 RFBs in the city now. I don't have the data compared to other cities, but Kirkland is head of the game on that one. We've done an analysis of low light intersections, and about 50 lights have been installed at crossings on high volume streets, done a lot of improvements with our curb ramps. So, and yet there's still so much more to do, but we've made good progress. In terms of bicycling, we plan to include a network. The analysis is to look at how well our existing plan network that was adopted in 2009 and then incorporated into the 2015 master plan, and make sure that still works and provides us with a connected network that is low stress. I mentioned before in the Vision Zero action plan strategies about lighting and intersection design. We do have over 60, about 70% of our planned bicycle network is complete. We've widened more or put buffers on a lot of our bike lanes. You've seen the green lines. We have developed a neighborhood greenways guide, and we will have our first 2 greenways this summer. Speaking of activities, I hope you look forward to an invitation from me to go on a bike ride or a walk on our new greenways once they are ready. We have a bike rack, a practice transit bike rack at our Kirkland Transit Center so that people can practice putting their bike on the bus. Again, I can go on and on about the things that we've done, and yet there's still so much more to do. But just kind of wanted to note that we're looking at comprehensively about the whole system. Before I move on to coordination and what we've done so far in our outreach, are there any comments or questions about the kind of the background and where we are right now?
Looks like we're fine.
Great. So we started this process at the same time, pretty much in parallel as the development of the Safer Routes to School action plans. Kari Page and I worked very, very closely to coordinate on our outreach, on the analysis that we're doing in terms of the prioritization measures. We spent a lot of time making sure our data was updated and we evaluated what we're tracking. And so when we get into these plans our data that we're using for our analysis is sound. We also coordinated with the development of the sustainability master plan through the neighborhood planning process and also through our neighborhood safety program. The safe and active transportation umbrella was a term that we came up with to try to address all three of these plans under one umbrella, because there's so much overlap with walking and biking with all of this other work that we're doing. We had done Walk and Bike School Month. This was in 2019, of course. We had a community meeting at City Hall. We did participate in the Sustainability Master Plan Summit. There was kind of an active transportation and school section. And I'll talk about the survey that we did in a minute. We had scheduled a safe and active transportation summit scheduled for March 28, 2020, along with going back to all of the rest of the community neighborhood associations that we weren't able to get to earlier than that. And as you all know, that has been canceled. The Safe Routes to School action plans went forward. And in fact, it was last April, I believe, was your study session that we were planning on coming to you with this plan as well. And so it's exciting to be back or to be finally be talking with you about this. I will mention our survey. It went out between October 2019, January of 2020. We received over 1,000 responses, which I have to say, I think it beat the dog park survey, which at that point was one of our highest. Sorry, I had to be a little competitive with that. So we were excited about the turnout. And this, as I mentioned, it was in coordination with questions about walking and bicycling, as well as about school access. And I just have a couple little tidbits for you. I can always bring back more, and we will have an appendix to this plan that will include all of the survey results. But people were interested in being outdoors more and walking and biking for exercise. A little less interest in just the need for for people that need to walk and bike, but it does look like there are enough people that filled out this survey that don't have access to a car. They're really trying to minimize their expense. We asked questions about their social reasons that would impact their decision to walk more or bike more. We also asked about infrastructure as well. I chose these slides because the answer was kind of the same. The biggest response we received is the personal safety from other roadway users. And it is kind of also interesting what people said about having to carry groceries or children and the convenience of driving, but these are the people that were interested in walking more. I don't have the data today, but another way of dicing this is the people that said they're not interested in what those reasons were, but we want to encourage people that are interested but wary. The same results for those interested in biking more. Again, the highest answer, I guess, is the personal safety from other roadway users. So that's a little bit about our coordination and outreach so far. The other thing that I'll mention is that we did hire, we got as far in our analysis to, we hired a consultant tool design group to help us with the analysis. We do have an outline. Some of our analysis is about halfway through, that really mostly looked at what our existing conditions look like. And then the active transportation plan was put on hold. And so at this point, what we'd like to do is get some direction from you about policy. I'll talk a little bit about what the analysis that we've done, and then we'll, based on council direction, continue this work that we started last year. So in terms of plan elements, we'll have background and existing conditions, updated goals and actions, and then a draft bicycle network and pedestrian areas. I'll talk about those a little bit. And then also an implementation plan that outlines how we prioritize projects and then how we get them built. And I'll talk about that a little as well. The other piece is a design guidance document where and it's not guidelines. We don't want to have to come back to council if something improves and we want to do something even more innovative than what we have in our guidance document. But it will help us with communicating with our CIP engineers and the contractors they hire and all of the many folks that are building out our city, and so that we can be consistent across the boards and across with a lot of people working on it, how we're addressing intersections. A couple of the things I'm kind of interested in looking at a little bit more are if we have more protected bike facilities, for instance, how we might transition between a regular bike facility and then a protected one and then back out into the street. So as we use more creative, innovative design, kind of the looking at what those are and then also looking at how they transition is something that we decided we would like to have. In terms of the policy direction, and really want to hear from you, the goal here is to design for people of all ages and abilities. And that the proposal here is that the plan would focus on access to transit, access to activity centers, and then keeping consistent with the 10-minute neighborhoods. It's part of our comprehensive planning process, and connections to the cross Kirkland corridor, which in and of itself does provide access to transit as people can connect up to Totem Lake and then down to the South Kirkland Park and Ride. And then look at other prioritization measures, so equity, and then the overlap with our other plans. So for instance, we may have crossings or sidewalks that have a certain priority level in our Safer Routes to School action plans, but then as we overlay them on top of the work we're doing for general connectivity for walking and biking everywhere, is that some projects may show more overlap and start to kind of help us trickle to the top. And this is where the update to our transportation master plan comes in eventually. But I'm going to pause here to see if anyone has comments on this proposed policy direction.
Councilmember Pascal.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Kim. Yeah, just a couple thoughts on the policy. These are for both pedestrian and bicycle facilities. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things that I was interested in with the access to activity centers, I'm just wondering if we should be thinking about parks too, as access to parks somehow, because I know that those are big generators of pedestrian and bicycle activity, and particularly for our younger populations who probably tend to more go to parks than perhaps a commercial district. But I think both are important, obviously. I just would like to see parks there, and I'm sure you've considered that. I'm just not sure where that fits in. Is that one that you were thinking about too?
That was one I was curious if council would bring up today.
Oh.
We are trying to prioritize as much as possible, but perhaps that just comes out in the prioritization framework, and we can still we can add parks to what we're evaluating the connections to. I was very curious of what council was going to say about parks today.
Yeah, and then one other one that I've been thinking about, and I don't know what to call it, but I want to somehow call out the sizable islands. I'll refer to them as islands in the city where there is absolutely no way there's no safe way to walk or bike to or from. in the when it comes to healthy food and stuff, they're called like food deserts. And in here, it's kind of like a walk and bike. There's just no way to get there. And so what I'm thinking about is like, I'm thinking about all the folks that live along Juanita Drive or Holmes Point Drive area. Now you can maybe walk within your little community there, but there's really no safe way for people of all ages or abilities to actually get to anywhere else in the city. And that's a very distinct thing, because when I think about the city, I think about where I live. I could walk or bike pretty much anywhere in the city today from Juanita. I maybe have to go a roundabout way, perhaps, to kind of stay on a dedicated facility or sidewalk, but I could get all the way to bridle trails if I wanted to. I can't get up to Finn Hill. I can't. There is no way that's safe, except for, perhaps a northbound, the uphill bike lane on Juanita Drive, but that's still not only the kind of the hardy bikers will use that, right? So I don't know how to reconcile that, but I think it's a kind of something that would be nice to somehow kind of call out, because otherwise that connection doesn't show up that often in some of the maps that I've seen so far that you presented to the Transportation Commission. So it's an idea that I have, and I've never really been able to crack it, but that was kind of my idea.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Kim, I'm glad you mentioned connections to transit activity centers and such. It's going to be an ongoing conversation for many topics that we're talking about on council. It's going to be part of the 85th station area plan. It's going to come up later tonight in the Moss Bay and Everest plan. How do we connect these different transit centers and activity centers? And having active transportation be able to do that is going to be important. As we think about this, I would like to think about the next level of biking, and not just saying, okay, we have done biking and that's wheeled transportation and that's it. There's a couple of nuances that may have differences that are worth thinking about. I'm seeing a prevalence, a lot more of e-bikes. So if we have electric assist bikes around, what does that mean for our biking infrastructure? And I don't know. I'm just curious. This may be something we need to think about. We've had a conversation previously about bike share. I think bike share is going to be important for these last mile connections, and will be an important part, should be an important part of this active transportation plan. I also hope as a council we'll have another discussion around scooters, and certainly as we're thinking about how we walk, bike, and roll around our city, I certainly don't want anything in our active transportation plan that would prevent scooters once we get to a way to be able to go do scooter shares. A number of our neighboring cities are taking a second shot at this. I hope we do too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I echo Deputy Mayor Arnold's comments about being really happy to see access to public transit in here. I think he mentioned being able to get from transit hub to transit hub. I'd like to add to that, really focusing on being able to have connection from residential areas to public transportation as well. I think that's a huge priority. In particular, it's an equity issue. It's a social justice issue, for folks to be able to have access to transportation, especially as we talk more about affordable housing, and we may have more folks who don't have access to motorized vehicles in our community, who may not have access to bicycles, who may not have other, who might just be being able to walk to public transportation. I think that should be a high priority for us to be able to provide safe infrastructure for them to be able to walk to the bus stop. I also wonder, I thought that was an interesting comment you made, Deputy Mayor Arnold, about e-bikes. I also wonder, I'm not at all an expert in this, but I do have 3 rollerbladers in my family. We're a rollerblading family. So I wonder with that too, because I know there are times where, there's only certain places that are, accommodating to rollerbladers versus bicyclers. And I don't understand those nuances, but I think that's something to consider as well, that hopefully we'll see more of that as part of active transportation. I also really appreciated Councilmember Pascal's comments about parks and recreation being part of this process as well. I think about that as we're talking about walking, biking, and rolling, making sure that, I know it's a value that we've had for so long in our parks in particular, not just being, ADA compliant, but being truly inclusive. And I think that this is an opportunity for overlap here with, I think of, recreational spaces and I don't know, maybe some places in parks where there's only steps, for example, where you can get up and down, and there might be, I'm not going to use the right terminology, but like the thing where you can roll your bike next to you on the stairs, right? Like there's like a track for that. But what about folks who use a wheelchair in our community, right? How do they get around, and having those considerations? I think that all of that needs to be prioritized as part of both transportation, but also where it intersects with recreation as well. In particular, since you mentioned in the survey that's, of the folks who at least filled out the survey, recreation is such a huge part of why they bike. And I wonder too about, the demographics of the folks who completed the survey and any sort of, non-response bias that might be part of those results there, that there might be the people who are more likely to need to use this infrastructure for transportation because they don't have access to a car, if they were less likely to respond to the survey as well. So I kind of take that with a grain of salt, those results. And there may be more folks in our community who don't have access to a car, and that's their reason for walking and biking, but perhaps just we didn't have as many responses from them in the survey of that population. But I think this is a great conversation that I'm looking forward to hearing more about this and moving forward with this more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any further discussion? Councilmember Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought I put my name down. Thank you, Kim. Both your presentations have been excellent tonight and really informative, so I appreciate it. Couple thoughts on the connections. When you talk about activity centers, you're talking about business centers. So I live in Houghton, the Houghton Business Center. But I'm also thinking about the connections to employment centers. So if I live in Houghton and I need to get to Evergreen to go to work, how do I get there? So I would add that. And when I think I love that we're talking about connections to the Cross-Kirkland corridor, and I love being on the Cross-Kirkland corridor. It is oversubscribed. We've got e-bikes and we've got rollerblades and so forth. So I think it's time that we need to take another look at our Cross-Kirkland corridor master plan and determine how it's serving our needs and possible improvements we need to make. Because we are pushing a lot of traffic on that. And then when we talk about equity, I want to make sure, Councilmember Pascal used a term today that I just wrote it down. It's hardy bike riders. We're talking about providing active transportation for all ages and abilities. And I want to make sure that we're clear on gender equity too. And for example, I wanted to ride to Juanita Beach this weekend. It's a sunny afternoon. I knew Lake Washington Boulevard was going to be busy. So I decided to take the Cross-Kirkland corridor up to Forbes Creek and then work my way down that way because I, as a bike rider who has an e-bike, so I have the power to get out of a sticky situation, was not comfortable being on Lake Washington Boulevard. So I took a look at the Transportation Commission packet that gave me a better understanding of level of traffic stress. And I would project that a majority, if we want to create a system so more people are adopting active transportation, we need to take into consideration their level of traffic stress. We know that women are encroached on more than women bike riders are encroached on more than male bike riders. We know that women are less likely to ride their bike as opposed to the hardy bike rider that Councilmember Pascal talked about. So when I was looking at the transportation package, a good majority of our roads are identified as level 2, which says that 60% of the people are comfortable riding on that. I question that interpretation, and I wonder whether we need to look at that. For example, on my e-bike, I can ride up 68 on the hill, which is a LTS2, except that I don't feel safe doing it. So I feel like we need to look at those again and make sure that we are truly building a system for all ages and abilities. I'm gonna check my notes real quick. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment? Councilmember Falcone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One thing, I didn't check my notes, as Councilmember Curtis did. I forgot to just say, I want to really strongly echo what Councilmember Pascal said about like a active transportation desert. You know, being a Finn Hill resident, this is something that we live. I know that we've been a lot of improvements since we moved here, and so I'm glad to see that. But that's something that's a real issue, you know, among Finn Hill residents, that we're not connected, for example, to the Cross-Kirkland corridor, or even to get down the hill safely. And I know we're working on this, but I think that's something we just need to continue to focus on, because there's a huge need there. There's school kids who go to Juanita Elementary who don't have a safe way to get down the hill, right? There's those of us who would love to be able to avoid using cars and go to the grocery store, but there's not a safe way to go there, you know. So it's getting to the bus stop, it's getting to the grocery store, it's going to our friends and neighbors' houses, it's getting to and from school. So there's definitely a huge drought or desert up here, up in the Finn Hill neighborhood in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I'm just going to add one comment, I think this has been a brilliant discussion. But when I look at it, I can't help but recognize that as we continue to grow appropriately and in the appropriate places, this is going to get harder and harder. And I think it might be timely for us to incorporate some of this discussion into our discussion in April as we look at the rescue funds that are coming our way. This is going to be an increasingly important element of our transportation system. We're going to rely on transitioning a fair number of people to bikes and walking and alternatives. And I think we're just going to have to pay serious attention to this as we move forward. And in our planning for both, particularly for the station area plan. Councilmember Pascal.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I agree. It's been a great discussion, great presentation. I'm assuming you might have more slides, but I just want to keep going a little bit on a few things that I didn't, because I didn't check my notes, actually. I had a couple more things. You mentioned design guidance in one of the previous slides. I think that's really important, and I'm glad that you brought that up. And that it's not like a council-driven thing, that you can change design as new things emerge, right? Things are rapidly evolving, and you see that with some of the different treatments that are being initiated across the city, but in other cities as well. So I think that's really important. I really would like to see the bike plan with the level of stress kind of helping indicate it, but really, how do we implement more protected bicycle facilities? And the protected bicycle facilities don't have to be the really kind of expensive kind that we're building on 100th or 124th Avenue corridors, where you're, basically constructing multi-million-dollar things. So, I think that hopefully that design guidance can provide some of that, but then you can take it and apply it to where maybe we could help improve that level of stress. And I totally agree with Councilmember Curtis on kind of maybe just recalibrating some of those maps I've seen at the commission level, because I was noticing that Juanita Drive, for example, was lower stress than Waverly Way. And I was like, I'd let my kids bike along Waverly Way, but I'm not on Juanita Drive. So those are just things that I think we can look at, because that's really going to inform where our priorities lie. Thank you.
All right. Should I keep going? Just a couple more slides. Mayor Sweet, or is it this?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you.
I was muted.
Okay. We do see that there are a couple places where we can look at the policy updates. So as I mentioned before a couple times, and even with Vision Zero, that data collection be great. Really better understanding how well we're doing. Are more people actually out walking and biking? For instance, we've been talking a lot about connected networks, and I'll talk a little bit more about how some of the analysis will address that. But it sounds like folks are really interested in making sure that that we're connected. I won't talk about the things that we've mentioned before. The bike parking piece is something that it would be nice to look at. For instance, our current zoning could be improved in terms of the bike parking recommendations are currently tied to the number of parking stalls. And perhaps we can decouple that. That's just a suggestion, and we can bring that back or please give me some of your thoughts today. We've talked a lot about the low cost enhancements and then maintenance as well. As we build more green lanes or we buffer more bike lanes, we separate out, making sure that we're able to maintain the facilities that we have and that we're adding. And so these are some of the areas we're hoping to take a closer look at, find some improvements. And then I can get into the analysis. This was one other place I wanted to pause a little bit, and then I have a couple more slides to really dive in to the analysis that we're doing. This is one other place I wanted to pause for a second. If anybody has anything else.
Council? I don't see anybody, Kim.
Okay. So the analysis that we're looking at for our bicycle network is looking at level of traffic stress. So that would be the presence and quality of the bike facility, the number of lane, speed limits, traffic. And then a follow-up to that is looking at the connectivity. So that's really taking between a certain number of census blocks and unbroken low stress connections between places. And what this will do is highlight places where you cannot connect via a safe facility, or you would have to go pretty far away from a direct route in order to find a network that's comfortable and convenient. I will echo, and some of you may have heard this already, but the Transportation Commission also did mention that they kind of also, similar to what Councilmember Curtis said, that the level of stress on certain roads didn't feel like we had a level of stress of 2 or a 1. Is that really the right number? And so we'll go back and talk with our consultants about how to better address our existing network and adjust that level of stress so that it really reflects what people are experiencing out on the ground. Actually, before I move on from this, the other thing I'll mention is that in our current transportation master plan, there is a goal for a network of neighborhood greenways. This is another place I feel is a really good opportunity for Kirkland. They're not necessarily really low cost, but in terms of the length of facility, or in kind of the bang for your buck, if you will, we do see a lot of opportunity. And so there are a couple places that we're looking to improve that network. We had a really interesting conversation with the Transportation Commission about, for instance, Market Street, where there could be a kind of a west of Market wiggle that might be more appropriate for people of all ages and abilities, or we look at trade-offs on Market, which is really a kind of a workhorse street that includes transit and parking, and so it was a really interesting conversation with them about that. And there are a couple other corridors. I think we're going to have some really interesting conversations about the investments on those places. So I just wanted to mention the greenways, and then the level of stress that was mentioned by the Transportation Commission, and then Market as an example of kind of how it that conversation was really interesting. And then in terms of the pedestrian network analysis, so for the safer routes to school, obviously was looking at school connectivity. And we are also looking at our gaps in our arterial and collector system. And this is another way of looking at gaps that connect the neighborhoods to activity centers. We can add job centers to that, where essentially it takes out, we take a look at how far somebody could walk using a safe facility and crosswalks. The areas that you don't see any color, so those green parcels, those are places that where people are unable to use a sidewalk and a crosswalk to get to that activity center within a mile. And so this can help us identify other local neighborhood streets where we can begin to fill in our network. And then lastly, I'll mention that we've already done this work by our transportation engineers, have identified crossings that need improvement based on crash history, speed, and volume. This is another area where we can look closer at the crossings of that are in our Safer Routes to School action plans, and see where we see overlap and priorities. There are a couple up here on that were recently funded, and so we'll have to kind of address which ones that we have received grant funds for, also down in downtown. And so this is just another piece of looking at additional crossings. So those are some example of the analysis. It sounds like the council is going to be really interested in diving into those details a bit more when we come back to you. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to keep going. I'm pretty much done. In terms of implementation, we had talked already about priorities. We do have in our scope of work with our consultant to identify some cost estimates for high priority projects. We can look at incremental increases to some of our current programs, like the paving program and the striping program, as opportunities. I had already talked about the coordination with Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero, and essentially through grants, through our CIP, through our existing programs, however we can try to implement this, we'll take a look and come up with some estimates and an incremental plan over time for how that might play out in terms of our implementation plan. And so in the next step slide is just the timing. Hope to have a final draft network for the bike recommendations and for pedestrian networks by the summertime. Want to make sure we have enough time for also with the overlap of Vision Zero, and then bring this draft plan back to you in the fall, and hopefully by November. If there's a council is interested in seeing the analysis, we can come back and share with you the detail a little bit more often. And I'll just mention, once we finalize a draft network, we'll want to begin our community engagement again, which was stalled last year. So that is my last slide. We're running low on time, so I just wanted to finish up. Please let me know if you have any other comments or questions.
Council. Kim, that was a fabulous report. Oh, Councilmember Pascal.
Sorry, I was late because I want to make sure give other council members a chance, since I feel like I've talked a few times now. Just one other item. I was wondering if the plan is going to arrive at like high priority needs and then kind of capture that as like what it would take to address the high priorities, whether that's pedestrian or bicycle, just so that we have an idea of what it's going to take to really tackle those.
Yeah.
Is that something that's going to be part of the plan?
Yes, and that's where some of the priorities come in that you all weighed in on, because we are going to have to prioritize, and so that'll be in the kind of the prioritization measures and also the overlap with some of our other plans.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Well, Kim, again, that was incredibly well done. You're going to have to go take some medicine to make sure you don't get hoarse. That was a lot of talking.
My water right here. Yes.
There you go. Well, thank you so very much.
Thank
Well
you.
done. And I think with that, we will take adjourn for now and return at 7:30 for our regular meeting.
Great.
Thank you. We are back in session following a study session for a Vision Zero Action Plan and Active Transportation update. Before I move on to item number 4 on the agenda, I would like to read a statement on behalf of the City Council. Today, the jury in the trial of Derek Chauvin found the former Minneapolis police officer guilty of murder and manslaughter charges in the death of George Floyd. We share in the relief felt around the country that justice has been served. The death of George Floyd is horrifyingly only one example of far too many deaths of Black and brown people by some members of law enforcement around the country. Generations of people have been impacted by fear, injury, and death caused by those who don't fulfill the charge of protecting human life. We are well aware that what happened in Minneapolis or anywhere in the country casts a shadow on all law enforcement. The men and women of the Kirkland Police Department have shown honor, understanding, and empathy as we face enormously complex and difficult issues with our community. We heard from our community through last year's protests and gatherings that change is needed. We are grateful for the honesty, candidness, and courage with which so many are sharing their perspectives and insights. Today marks a pivotal moment when we saw that our country can do better. It's a turning point. We must continue to work together to end structural and institutional racism in order to stop history from repeating. Thank you. That takes us to item number 4 on our agenda, honors and proclamations. And we're going to start out with our annual Earth Month proclamation, which will be delivered by Councilmember Neil Black, City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. As you all know, April 22nd is Earth Day. It'll be the 51st celebration of Earth Day. And at this moment, we've now expanded April, the entire month of April, as Earth Month in Kirkland, Washington. And the memo that's included in the council packet has many links to actions that the city has taken to protect the environment and also opportunities for people to be involved. So with that, we'll be proclaiming April 2021 as Earth Month in Kirkland, Washington.
Thank you, City Manager. So I'm going to read a proclamation of the City of Kirkland proclaiming April 2021 as Earth Month in Kirkland. Whereas the City of Kirkland has a long-standing dedication to protecting and enhancing its natural environment. And whereas an adopted City of Kirkland City Council goal is to protect our natural environment through sustainable goals and practices to equitably meet the needs of all community members for a healthy environment without compromising the needs of future generations. And whereas Earth Month is a reminder that communities and individuals can make a positive impact to reduce energy use, produce or purchase clean renewable energy to mitigate climate change, and reduce environmental impacts. And whereas Kirkland residents continually show commitment to the environment by reducing waste, recycling, composting, preventing water pollution, advocating for the environment, utilizing active transportation, and volunteering to restore natural areas. And information about participating in these programs and other environmental efforts may be found on our website. And whereas numerous city programs across departments work to protect the environment, ranging from the Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan, special recycling events and waste reduction efforts, protection of the city creeks, wetlands, and lakes, the Green Kirkland Partnerships, natural parkland restoration events, and more. And whereas the City of Kirkland is active in regional environmental efforts like the EnviroStars Green Business Program, Lake Washington, Cedar, Sammamish Watershed Salmon Recovery Council, and the King County Cities Climate Collaborative, K4C, to reduce carbon emissions, environmental impacts, and improve sustainable behavior. And whereas the City of Kirkland has adopted a citywide sustainability master plan to help coordinate all efforts and implement new actions and goals that will protect, mitigate, and enhance the environment to ensure that current and future generations of the Kirkland community are able to meet their needs. And whereas Kirkland will continue to work toward solutions to climate change and seek strategies to protect the environment for all future generations. Now, therefore, Penny Sweet, Mayor of Kirkland, does hereby proclaim April 2021 as Earth Month in Kirkland, Washington, and calls upon all community members to take action to reduce their impact on the environment.
Thank you, Councilmember Black. David Barnes, our Sustainability Master, is joining us tonight to accept the proclamation. David, do you have some words for us?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Councilmember Black and Council. I accept this Earth Month proclamation on behalf of the city staff and the community who work so hard to make sure we have a healthy and resilient environment. Over the years, we've learned so much about how our efforts can contribute to a sustainable Kirkland, and that the entire community has an important role to play in ensuring our success, both now and in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. This takes us to item B on the agenda, Stand Against Racism Proclamation. Councilmember Amy Falcone will read the proclamation and City Manager will introduce it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Stand Against Racism is a signature campaign of the YWCA USA to build community among those who work for racial justice and to raise awareness about the negative impact of institutional and structural racism in our communities. This year's nationwide theme is From Declarations to Change, Addressing Racism as a Public Health Crisis. There's more information that can be found on the website standagainstracism.org. And our local YWCA Seattle King County invites the community to participate in a Stand Against Racism Town Hall on April 30th, 2020. And more information can be found on our website. So tonight we'll be proclaiming April 22nd to 25th as YWCA's Stand Against Racism Weekend.
Thank you. And I believe Leslie Miller is here to accept the proclamation. Go ahead, Amy.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, City Manager. I'll be reading a proclamation of the City of Kirkland proclaiming April 22nd through 25th as YWCA Stand Against Racism Weekend in Kirkland, Washington. Whereas all residents, regardless of race, creed, or ethnicity, deserve to be treated with dignity, respect, compassion, and justice. And whereas on February 21st, 2017, the City of Kirkland adopted Resolution R 5240, declaring Kirkland as a safe, inclusive, and welcoming city for all people. And whereas on August 4th, 2020, the City of Kirkland adopted Resolution R 5434, affirming that Black Lives Matter and approving the framework for Kirkland to become a safe, inclusive, and welcoming community through actions to improve the safety and respect of Black people in Kirkland and end structural racism by partnering with those most affected. And whereas on March 16th, 2021, the City Council issued a statement condemning recent and continuing acts of violence against Asian Americans across the country and reaffirming that racism in any form and against any group has no place in Kirkland. And this statement is available on the city's website, along with other resources curated to support the safety of our Asian American and Pacific Islander community. And whereas the Kirkland community values initiatives that will end race-based disparities and make the world a more equitable, inclusive, and dignified place for all to live. And whereas the elimination of racism can be achieved only with the participation of all community members in dialogue, reflection, and action. And whereas the City of Kirkland supports the YWCA's mission to eliminate racial inequalities in employment, education, healthcare, housing, human services, and other areas that affect quality of life. And whereas April 22nd through 25th, 2021, marks the occasion of the annual Stand Against Racism Weekend, a signature campaign of YWCA designated to build community among those who work for racial justice and to raise awareness about the negative impacts of institutional and structural racism. And whereas this year's national campaign urges communities both to move beyond declarations and focus on change, and to recognize that racism is a public health crisis. Now, therefore, Penny Sweet, Mayor of Kirkland, hereby proclaims April 22nd through 25th, 2021 as YWCA Stand Against Racism Weekend in our city, and encourages residents, local businesses, educators, and community and faith-based organizations to advocate for the elimination of structural and institutional racism.
Leslie, did you have some words for us?
Yes, thank you. I am pleased to be able to accept this on behalf of the YWCA and want to say thank you to the council and city leadership for all they're doing to address racism, and just want to highlight the theme of public health as the theme that when we think about racism and a lot of our health determinants, that it's not about individuals, but it's really about racism that shapes the disparate health outcomes that we see in our community. And that has been reflected in the tragic number of deaths during the COVID pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie. That takes us to our final proclamation of the day, the Records and Information Month proclamation, which will be read by our Master of Public Information Access, Councilmember Nixon. City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we'll be proclaiming April as Records and Information Management Month. Public records requests and proper records management are an integral part of a well-functioning and transparent government. And this has gone on since 1995, when the Association of Information Management Professionals designated April as Records and Information Management Month in appreciation of the importance of records and information management. And to receive it is our own award-winning City Clerk, Kathy Anderson.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, for this opportunity. A proclamation of the City of Kirkland proclaiming April 2021 as Records and Information Management Month in Kirkland. Whereas the City of Kirkland's records are valuable assets essential to the effective operation of city government and held as a public trust, critical to protecting the rights and interests of the constituents of the City of Kirkland. And whereas the management of public records, information, and data is critical to every government agency for effective and efficient operations and in support of an open, transparent, and accountable government. And whereas the management of public records, information, and data is critical to every individual for protecting rights and privacy, to every business and organization for ensuring compliance and profitability, and to every government agency for serving the best interests of those within its jurisdiction. And whereas technologies for creating and storing records, information, and data continue to expand the amounts of information that can be created and acquired. And whereas professional control and governance of records, information, and data is necessary for the effective operation of modern government, as well as the reduction of risk, liability, and associated costs and compliance with global standards and practices. And whereas the Kirkland community experiences high quality public services supported by the important role and functions provided by records and information management professionals. And whereas the City of Kirkland has been recognized with national and state awards for the successes of the highly trained and dedicated employees entrusted with responsibility for the careful management, disposition, and provision of access to public records on behalf of the constituents of the City of Kirkland. Now, therefore, Penny Sweet, Mayor of Kirkland, on behalf of the Kirkland City Council, proclaims April 2021 as Records and Information Management Month, and with this proclamation extends our gratitude and thanks to the Records and Information Management team of the City of Kirkland.
Thank you, Councilmember Nixon. Ms. Anderson, did you have some words?
I do. I'd like to thank the council for the recognition on behalf of city staff who manage and produce the city's official records. We hope we are serving the transparency goals of the city and the city council and also the public interest. So we appreciate your appreciation.
Thank you very much. Okay, this takes us to item number 5, communications. We have no announcements, so we go to item B, items from the audience. This is the time in our meeting when we normally hear from the public on matters which are not quasi-judicial or scheduled for a public hearing, of which there are none scheduled this evening. Because of the current social distancing requirements related to COVID-19, members of the public cannot participate in person at tonight's meeting. However, the public may still comment by Zoom or telephone. For those members of the public who are joining us by phone or on Zoom, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and the council will receive up to 3 comments each on both sides of each issue. If you are participating by Zoom, please click in the participants box to raise hand to be recognized. For those participating by phone, please dial *9 to be recognized to speak. In addition, if you are participating by Zoom but do not wish to speak, you are encouraged to watch the council meeting by live stream through the city's website. Thank you. City Manager, what have we got lined up?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the moment, we have the first 2 hands up are Lisa McConnell and Sydney Layardi.
Layardi?
Yes.
Ms. McConnell? Welcome, Ms. McConnell.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Sweet, council members, and City Manager Triplett. I speak to you tonight as a member of Kirkland Greenways. Kirkland Greenways is very excited about moving forward with the Lake Washington Boulevard pilot study. The Transportation Commission expressed their unanimous support at their last meeting. Juanita Neighborhood Association is also expressing their support. Kirkland Greenways started discussing and working with Feet First about the best way to collect accurate metrics and community input during the opening of the East Side's best shoreline. Kirkland Greenways already discussed with Jim Lopez the amazing opportunities for small businesses. Coordinating with Shop Local Kirkland, even the candlesticks used to demarcate this public space could be a space for logos and QR codes linking to downtown businesses, or they could just indicate how many minutes it'll take to get to an ice cream shop. We are also entering discussions with Kirkland Library about possibly creating a storybook walk that starts on the boulevard and leads through downtown to the library, a great tie-in to the summer reading program. A storybook walk is an activity that places enlarged pages from the children's story along a trail for children to share reading a book as they walk with their family and friends. I don't know about you, but I have several parents that are so ready to smother a granddaughter in a year's worth of in-person love. You know they're coming. This public space has so much potential for art, for music, for placemaking, and for safely gathering. I'm quoting from the shoreline area section of the comprehensive plan. Goal SA-18 provides substantial recreation opportunities for the public in the shoreline area. With miles of shoreline, the city has preserved significant portions of its waterfront in public ownership as parks. Kirkland's waterfront parks are the heart and soul of the city's park system. They bring identity and character to the park system and contribute significantly to Kirkland's charm and quality of life, end quote. And indeed, it is the heart and soul of our town. Whether walking with your loved one to dinner, with visitors to show off our downtown, or just to get out and get fresh air and great views, nothing beats our Lake Washington Boulevard. I urge the council to present our finest jewels along the lake while helping downtown businesses and all the people of Kirkland to enjoy this public space by maximizing the Lake Washington Boulevard pilot study this summer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that brings up Sydney Layardi.
Then after that is Kristen from Houghton, and then Andrea Dixon.
Welcome, Ms. Liardi.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. My name is Sydney. I'm 16 years old. I live in the Kirkland Highlands and I go to Seattle Prep. I am here to talk about ranked choice voting, or RCV, and why it's important for Kirkland to pass a resolution in support of this voting system. Right now, candidates don't need a majority of the votes. They just need more than their competitor. This incentivizes them to water down their true beliefs and values in order to gain party popularity. As a future voter, it was interesting to see how candidates interacted and campaigned in this past election in order to win their party support rather than the voters. I was excited to see young and upcoming politicians push for their chance, as well as seeing who my parents would vote for. My parents and I were intrigued by some of the other newer candidates, but because of the weight of the election, they didn't want to feel like they risked their vote. We live in a democracy, and that should mean that voting your conscience never feels like a risk. RCV eliminates this worry by creating backups. Naturally, as humans, we rank everything. We always have a backup. For instance, if I wanted to go get a salad from George's downtown and saw that they were closed, I would then go to my second choice of Acropolis. We naturally have second choices, and an election is no different. RCV matches those instincts by allowing you to vote for who you want without feeling like your vote is going to waste. If your number one candidate drops out or gets the least amount of votes, you can be assured that your vote will then automatically go to your second choice. There is no perfect election process, but I firmly believe that RCV has the lowest opportunity cost, making it an immediate upgrade from our current system. Kirkland is a strong and advancing city, and I want my city to be at the forefront of democracy in Washington. This issue is important to me because every other issue I'm passionate about can only be changed through legislation and politics. With an unfair system, there is no hope for change. Additionally, through the lenses of this year's racial disputes and tragedies, a system that boosts diversity and equitable representation is necessary in helping to mend the imbalance. RCV is a small shift towards a better system, which is why I urge you to pass a resolution supporting ranked choice voting. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time and the work you do for Kirkland.
Thank you very much, Ms. Liardi. Okay, that brings up Kristen from Houghton.
Hi, my name is Kristen Dixon.
Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you. I live in Houghton, and I wanted to talk about solid waste. The city of Kirkland has an existing memorandum of understanding in place with King County Solid Waste. That memorandum, among other things, eliminates the storage of waste containers overnight. These containers prove to be a source of rodents, pests, litter, and overwhelming odor in this residential neighborhood for decades. The publicly available site inspection reports leading up to the signing of the MOU document decades of issues with no corrective action from the county. When contacted about this issue, you, our elected officials, had no comment, instead allowing a city employee to claim that the savings this would provide to the county was the real priority. I believe the city's priority needs to be the citizens of this city. And I'm a little surprised I have to tell you this. It is not my job to sacrifice my ability to open my windows nor those of my neighbors in the Houghton community so that the county can save an estimated $5 per year per residential waste customer. The neighborhood has existing protections in place because the county was so bad for so long at being a good neighbor. There are 50 years of historic documents stating this, and I believe it is your job to understand this. If you had sought public, transparent process with active community engagement that you have been talking about, you would have heard this from anyone who has lived in this neighborhood for more than 20 years. And that is a surprisingly high number of people. There are scores of third-generation families in this neighborhood. They have been in Houghton since this was an open landfill. They understand better than anyone what it is like to have a transfer station as a neighbor. Did you speak to any of them before trying to put another transfer station in their neighborhood? Did you approach the longstanding neighborhood association and run this plan past them? Did you talk to the Houghton Community Council? No, none of this was done. The people actually living here did not have a voice. There is no concern for those actually impacted. I ask that you rectify this and stand with the the county of Houghton. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. That brings up Andrea Dickstein.
And our next speaker is Jarek Gelzer, followed by Jen from Houghton.
Welcome, Ms. Dickstein.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Sweet and council members. First, I want to thank you for taking the time this evening. My name is Andrea Dickstein, and I'm the Families in Transition Program Coordinator at the Kindring Center. Kindring is an early intervention center. This means we provide full developmental evaluations and therapies for children birth to age 3. Our therapies take place either in the family's home, in the community, or on-site at Kindring. The therapies we offer include special ed, speech and physical therapy, feeding therapy, and infant mental health therapy. Infant mental health, it's a thread that connects all of what we do with these kiddos as we work on the attachment and relationship between parent or caregiver and child. First time I learned about infant mental health, I remember thinking babies don't really need therapy, taking the term a bit too literally. But actually, infant mental health refers to how well a child develops socially and emotionally from ages 0 to 3. Really important piece. We now know that these are crucial years for developing close relationships and attachments to their caregivers. This is where the Families in Transition team fits in so closely, also known as the FIT team. And I'm really lucky to be part of the FIT team. Our team specifically supports young children experiencing housing instability in their families. In addition to myself and an outreach coordinator, we consist of a speech therapist, a special educator, an infant mental health therapist, and an occupational therapist. We also have a family resource coordinator to assist with the scheduling of the appointments and evaluations. Our therapists are all trained to support families experiencing trauma and are fluent in Arabic, Spanish, and American Sign Language. Research shows that homeless children have higher rates of developmental delays, and we see this in our work every day. The FIT team recently served a family in Kirkland whose son required physical therapy due to motor delays. The family had been living in a car for an extended period of time. There was no space for the child to roll, crawl, or move around freely. The therapist worked with the family to develop a care plan and to help him bridge gaps that this child had, despite living circumstances. FIT is really proud of our play groups and parenting support programs that we offer, and they're a really important part of Kindring. Our play groups take place at our partner organizations, such as transitional housing developments or shelters. We're currently working with organizations including Imagine Housing and New Bethlehem Shelter, just to name a few. Community play groups provide parents or caregivers an opportunity to connect with others that have similar lived experiences. When I facilitate these groups, I'm modeling language and play and providing structured time for parents to bond. The play groups, which meet often weekly, allow me to build relationships with the parents as well. I can do a gentle screening and share my observations with the parents if there are developmental challenges. The parenting program FIT offers is specifically for parents that are experiencing chronic stress. It's 6 weeks long, focuses on nurturing the social emotional development of their children. We offer strategies with challenging behaviors and can prevent parents from feeling frustrated and overwhelmed. For those wanting something more individualized, I provide one-on-one parenting support. It's a safe space to talk about tips and tricks with challenging behaviors, sleep, tantrums, sibling rivalry, toileting.
Ms. Dickstein, can you wrap it up? Your 3 minutes are up.
Okay. I'll leave you with this statistic. 10% of all children experiencing homelessness who spent time in shelters are under the age of 1. Almost 50% of all children in shelters are between the ages of 1 and 5. With FIT, our goal is to connect families to early intervention and community services by providing a team of skilled and compassionate providers. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, that brings up Jared Golzer. Is Mr. Goldsurf still out there?
Our next speaker, if we can't find him, is Jen from Houghton.
Okay, is he not out there anymore?
We're reconnecting him.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, welcome, Jarek.
Okay. I recently had the misfortune of needing to help someone file a police report for a mail theft, and I noticed that the required fields for the report included race, gender, and citizen status of who the mail was stolen from, but not the address that the mail was stolen from. As you consider how to eliminate structural and institutional racism from the city, please realize that by making this type of information required, you're opening the door to discriminatory policing practices and alienating our minority communities. Please fix this and other similar issues in our public services as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldsurf. And that would bring up Jen from Houghton.
Then we have two more speakers after that. We have Matthew and we have Phil A.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Jen, could you give us your last name again?
My last name is Zentz, Z-E-N-T-Z.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Please go ahead.
So, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I have an invitation for all of you. I'd love to have you come over for a barbecue in my backyard in August. I'm on the group of 5 people and all of our neighborhood. And we have been fighting for Houghton Transfer Station to not expand into the common space that we have that has been determined a park in our backyard. Now, what's really interesting is along with that, we have now been told that we are going to have up to 5 open trucks every weekend from July. Now, I'm not sure how you're going to feel about coming to my house for a barbecue in the middle of a very hot summer with a transfer station with garbage sitting out back of my house. But it seems to me like Kirkland City Council should be making sure that this does not happen. It is a memorandum of understanding with the county, and it is time for this to stop. Please start taking care of us. After months and months of fighting for the expansion of this footprint, and now it's happening, it's like getting a stick poked in our eye, to now we have to defend ourselves against open garbage next to our house. So I'm sorry that I'm feeling very angry about this. I'm not okay with violating this MOU. This demand was a promise that King County made with our neighborhood in 2005. Please resolve this without dragging our neighborhood through pollution of our air. We have fruit fly expansion, fruit fly, unbelievable amount of fruit flies. We have rats climbing in our house walls because of this transfer station. And the amount and the idea of us having a transfer station with open garbage trucks sitting next to my backyard is absolutely unacceptable after all of the years of being told this was going to close in the first place. And now we're going to have to deal with open garbage. Please reconsider. Please tell King County absolutely not. Do not accept this. Please, on our behalf, your voters are asking for you to stop accepting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zentz. And that brings up Matthew.
Good evening.
Matthew, could you share your last name, please?
Yes, it's Gelzer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would really appreciate the Earth Day proclamation today. Great to hear the city take such a strong position on that. As part of that, I'd like to bring up maybe a lesser known fact about the closed Houghton landfill. The Houghton landfill has been under EPA monitoring since the 80s, when it was researched as a Superfund site. As part of the ongoing requirements for environmental protection for that location, King County Solid Waste is required to report to the EPA on a quarterly basis. The Houghton transfer station has failed 8 of the past 12 reporting periods with significant violations noted. And in fact, actually has failed to report in the last 2 reporting periods. As the Houghton transfer station and Houghton landfill actually serves as outflow directly to the headwaters of Yarrow Creek going into Yarrow Bay, it's extremely alarming that the county has not taken a more proactive stance in resolving these issues to keep the waters of Kirkland clean and the waters of our salmonoid streams clear as required by state law. We ask that the city of Kirkland take a strong position as part of this Earth Day and this Earth Day month to pressure the county to resolve these ongoing issues with the contamination coming from the closed Houghton landfill. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Phil A.
Can you hear me?
We can, Phil. What is your last name?
Allen, A-L-L-E-N.
Thank you. Welcome. Phil, are you here to speak in reference to the Houghton transfer station?
Somewhat. I'm actually here to talk about the Bridle Trails neighborhood plan, but it certainly intersects with the Houghton transfer station. So I don't know exactly what side of what topic I'm on and whether I'd be third or fourth. So I'm looking to.
If you can just keep your reference.
Say like, hey, you're a first time speaker.
Just try to keep your references
here because I'm getting
neighborhood associated. Beg your pardon?
Totally. I'm going to be quoting from the neighborhood plan. Hello, Kirkland City Council, and thank you for giving me some time to speak. A fellow community member forwarded me a link to the Bridle Trails neighborhood plan from early 2019. I asked if I could take a look at it just to think about it in relation to the Northeast Regional Transfer Station siting process. There we got our intersection. If I can get a quick head nod from the council members, if they would be under the impression that a neighborhood plan from 2019 is still in effect. I got Neil Black. I think that was a yes. I'm going to continue. I believe the chat is disabled, so I can't do that directly. But please do come along a quick tour of the places where the neighborhood community plan and Northeast Regional Transfer Station siting process intersect. So when I was flipping through this document, which is up on kirkland.wa.gov, on page 6, it says, I'm going to try to do the quote as best I can, a neighborhood greenway provides options for walking and biking from one part of Kirkland to another and to the cross-Kirkland corridor and regional bike trails. The Houghton Park and Ride and its close proximity to the I-405 Northeast 70th Street interchange provides residents with easy access to and numerous destinations throughout the region. The future use of the King County Transfer Station property is unknown at this time. However, the neighborhood vision is for the transfer station to close and see the property redeveloped for a variety of park, recreational, and possibly other uses. And as I scroll down through it, policy BT8 is about the park and ride. This is, several pages later, and continues along the lines of expanding transit capacity. Policy BT10 says, quote, enhance and restore Yarrow Creek and wetlands in the area shown in figure BT4. I think this gets back to what Matt, who was just before me, also happened to reference. Policy BT7 is about closing the current transfer station, continues along the lines of expanding the property for park uses. So a fellow Kirkland resident just gave a really nice speech about the Shoreline Neighborhood Plan. I think she may have been actually the first speaker. And if I understand, the goal with the neighborhood plans is that they're followed because it gives a predictable path for residents, for businesses, for land developers, and for schools. Probably a whole host of other reasons I can't even imagine. I was happy to hear at the last city council meeting that Mayor Sweet was going to, as assertively as possible, request that some additional sites be selected for the EIS for the transfer station process so that this plan could be followed. Now, I got a frown there, so perhaps I misheard something at the last city council meeting, and I apologize for that. So As a resident of Kirkland for a significant number of years, surrounded by people who've been residents even longer, I would encourage you to continue to provide your feedback to the King County Solid Waste Division in order to help keep the Bridle Trails neighborhood plan going on plan. And so that
Mr.
they
Allen?
actually cite a transfer station that gives the people of Northeast King County the expanded services that they need.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Thank you very much for your time.
City Manager, do we have anyone else?
That is all we have who have asked to speak so far.
So is there anyone else in the viewing audience who wishes to speak at this time?
Nope, we have no one else, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing none, I will declare this items from the audience period closed. This takes us to public hearings, of which there are none, then special presentations. We will have a State of the College address from President Eric Murphy of Cascadia College. City Manager, do you want to introduce Eric?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we included the extensive and impressive biography of Dr. Murray in the memo. But I just want to say that over the last decade, he's been a tremendous friend to Kirkland and a tremendous partner to work with. He's very engaged in almost all of our major civic organizations, and it's great to have an opportunity to hear from him about what he's doing and what the school is doing. And so he's going to talk to us tonight. So welcome.
Absolutely. Welcome, Dr. Murray.
Thank you very much, Mayor Sweet. Thank you, Kurt, for that. Hello, City Council. It was a pleasant surprise for me when I logged on earlier today just to see a lot of familiar faces. I am familiar with a lot of you. I'm just sorry we haven't had the opportunity to interact lately. And because of this little thing called a pandemic, we didn't have a State of the College address last year, so it's been a little while coming for you. As you know, and I know you are very proud of the fact that Lake Washington Institute of Technology is located right in your city, and President Morrison and I like to think of ourselves as two sides of the same coin, where she focuses on professional technical degrees. I focus on transfer degrees at Cascadia, and Kirkland is within my service district. Last time I was at the council, I don't remember what the topic was, but you have one of the most passionate citizenry of any of the cities that I visit when I do my State of the College address. And so great for involved citizens. And this is the 5th City Council and my last one of the year. So I would like to share my PowerPoint. Do I have the ability to do that today?
Yes. You do.
Yes, you do.
Okay. Let's share a screen and you get to see my desktop for a minute. That, by the way, are the wetlands on our campus, which we share with UW Bothell. And let's get this going. All right. So one of the reasons we chose this background for this year's presentation is that while we are in Bothell, Cascadia is not that far out in the universe and not that far from Kirkland. In fact, a large number of our students come from high schools located, the high school located in Kirkland. So we wanted to, we're not that far. And just wanted to review some fast facts with you about the college, just to remind everyone. 19 is our average age. We have the youngest age of any community college in the state. We serve about 5,000 unique students. 80% of those intend to go to the university, and 50% need a part-time job. That statistic is important because we have the lowest financial aid eligibility of all of the campuses, but half of our students need to work, and they fit into that middle class range of income. And so